Audible Studios presents Faerie Wrath, The Changeling Chronicles, Book 4. Written by Emma L. Adams. Performed by Lucy Christian. Chapter 1. On light feet, I stalked across the living room, armed with a jar of salt rather than my usual sword. It'd have looked more impressive if I'd actually been able to see the ghost. As it was, I looked idiotic. Just call me Ivy Lane, mercenary turned exorcist. I had a sword that lit up with bright blue light to warn me when fairies were around. I had daggers in my pockets, with which I could kill someone in 5 seconds flat. And I was no slouch in hand-to-hand combat either. None of those things were any use whatsoever when the enemy was dead. Ghosts were usually a matter for necromancers, but with the number of undead on the prowl, they were running short. So the woman who owned this house had called Isabel and me. One necromancer apprentice accompanied us. Our job? Stop the ghost wrecking the place and push it into the trapping circle the apprentice set up. I'd had more experience with death than most people in the room, but being buddies with the necromancer guardian was no help whatsoever against the living. "It destroyed my house!" screeched the middle-aged woman cowering behind the sofa. "Destroyed it! I want compensation!" I winced. Pretty sure she'd fractured my eardrums. I didn't blame the ghost for staying hidden out of sight. "We'll find it," I said. Isabel and I had put a circle of salt around the house and blocked the way into the hall. The kitchen and living room were joined by a single door, and because nobody knew which room the spirit was actually hiding in, we hadn't been able to seal it off. "Ivy," Isabel called across the room. "The trap's ready." Good. I moved towards her, testing every step carefully. Poltergeists were notorious pranksters, and this one had already tripped up the necromancer apprentice, Colby, causing him to faceplant into his own summoning circle. Not dangerous, just annoying. Didn't mean I wanted to be alone in the house with one. I'd feel sorry for Mrs. Bennet if she hadn't spent the last half-hour shouting abuse at our unlucky necromancer assistant. "Some exorcist you are," she growled. "Useless, the lot of you." I glared at her, then concentrated on my path. I felt vaguely ridiculous holding a jar of salt between me and the place I thought the poltergeist must be hiding. Trapping one of the fey kind was easier by comparison. No bait would work on the dead. Instead, I had to drive it out by force. Mrs. Bennet had screamed bloody murder when I tried to douse the furniture in salt, so I'd been forced to wait until the spirit had moved to the room's far corner instead. At least, the necromancer apprentice said so. Since he was the one with the spirit sight, we'd have to take his word for it. Salt couldn't actively harm ghosts the way it did undead, but if a spirit managed to solidify, salt made it dissolve into ectoplasm. Not that the spirit would be strong enough, thankfully, but the ghost still avoided the areas of the room we'd covered in salt. Isabel stood against the other wall. I moved in at a diagonal angle and threw a handful of salt at the floor. Then another. Slowly, we'd drive the spirit out of the corner and into the necromancer's circle waiting behind Isabel. She'd tossed an illusion spell over it, so it looked like the way into the hall was clear. We made the weirdest band of exorcists ever. Isabel, with her array of witch charms and protective symbols drawn in chalk against her dark skin, looked more the part of exorcist in training than the necromancer did. As for me, the sword at my waist made me look more like the freelance mercenary I used to be than a pseudo-ghost hunter. And Colby, the skinny, pale necromancer kid, kept tripping over the end of a coat made for someone half a foot taller than him. "I'm sorry," he stuttered to Mrs. Bennet. "Like I said, we were delayed." "Destroyed!" she screeched, pointing at the pile of stuffing that had once been 3 cushions. The poltergeist had torn up half the furniture before we'd got here. Another scattering of salt. The poltergeist was cornered. 2 more moves and the job would be over. Isabel and I normally dealt with fairy-related problems, not spirits. But work had dried up over the Christmas period and was still low. We'd lost half our clientele thanks to Larson, my former employer, lowering his rates the same day Isabel and I had set up our business. Apparently, he'd forgotten my warning. I rarely bothered to think about my ex-boss these days. I had enough people to handle. The Mage Council, for one, the Necromancers, the Half-Fairies, and their ever-disgruntled chief, Frank, the Necromancer Ghost Guardian, who expected weekly updates from me to make sure I hadn't accidentally messed with the veil again, and the Fairies, of course, who went above and beyond to ruin my day. Still, after this, I could check one problem off the list. I grinned at the spot where the poltergeist was hiding. Gotcha. Now the only place the invisible menace could go was into the trap. Isabel nodded to me. I stepped forward. Crash! I spun around in time to see the china cabinet on the room's other side wobble. An expensive-looking plate clattered to the ground. What? I stared. The trap's supposed to negate kinetic energy. It's not in the trap! The necromancer apprentice yelped, throwing his arms over his head. A plate soared at him and Mrs. Bennet, shattering against the back wall. Mrs. Bennet screeched like a fire engine. Tearing her straggling grey hair from its roots, she advanced on Isabel and me. You incompetent children! Give that trap here! I can't move the trap, Isabel started. Too late. Mrs. Bennet had walked into it. The illusion dropped, and transparent bars instantly surrounded the old woman. At the same time, another plate flew across the room and hit the back wall in a shower of broken china. Shit, I said. Mrs. Bennet screamed again. 3 plates flew to the ceiling and smashed. My eyes followed the movement, trying to pinpoint where they came from. But the one person in the room with spirit sight had thrown himself behind the sofa to avoid being struck by a flying plate. Colby! I yelled at him. Tell us where the spirit is! Damn it! Of all the times having a necromancer's ability to see spirits would come in handy. Isabel, as a witch, couldn't see the runaway poltergeist either. She moved to disable the trap around the screaming old woman instead, while I ducked flying missiles and threw salt where I thought the spirit might be. Stop wrecking my furniture and get me out of here! Screamed Mrs. Bennet. I very nearly said it was an improvement, having her behind bars where she wouldn't get under our feet, but managed to hold my tongue at the last second. You, I said to the necromancer, get another trap set up. Give it to me then. I marched over to him. An armchair swung around and knocked me off my feet. I managed to land in a roll, coming upright with the taste of salt on my tongue. Great. My hair was covered in it. Isabel made it over to the trap, while I grabbed Colby by the scruff of his neck. Give me the trapping materials. I need candles. Another crash. Bits of china showered over our heads. Isabel ducked too, while Mrs. Bennet tore at the transparent restraints, stomping her feet against the trap's edge. It tricked me. Colby rubbed his arm where a larger piece of china had struck him. I swear I saw the spirit over there in the corner. There isn't more than one, is there? I didn't have a lot of experience with the spirit sight, but I figured it was reliable enough. Maybe not. I don't know. I saw something in the spirit realm. Movement. Great. I looked around. Isabel snapped open the trap, and Mrs. Bennet ran out in time to trip over the armchair. 3 mugs left the cabinet and started juggling themselves. That's a giveaway if I ever saw one, I muttered. Colby, give me the spare salt. I took the container and tossed it to Isabel. If Mrs. Bennet got out of the way, we might have a chance of salvaging this situation. Colby and I edged along the back wall, ducking underneath the huge framed pictures hung there. Isabel, meanwhile, threw half the container of salt against the wall by the cabinet. The spirit would have to move in the other direction towards the trap. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bennet remained hunched on the armchair and didn't seem inclined to get out of the way. An inhuman laugh echoed around the room. Mrs. Bennet screamed, as did Colby. He broke free from me and ran for the door into the kitchen. "Don't!" Too late. A frying pan flew across the room and hit him on the head. Colby dropped to the floor. Crap. I moved over to him. He looked dazed, not unconscious. I let go of Colby and threw half my own container of salt at the entryway to the kitchen. Now we had the spirit in one room. We'd cut off its escape. Another laugh, an angrier one. A mug shattered overhead, followed by a second. A creaking noise made me spin around in alarm. Crap. Guys, the picture frame! Isabel leaped over the sofa, and I dragged Colby's limp body after her. Not a moment too soon, the giant wooden-framed landscape on the back wall wobbled, then fell, crashing to the floor in a shower of glass. But it didn't stop. The huge wooden frame lifted from the ground, aiming at Mrs. Bennet. I didn't stop to think. I pulled the sword from its sheath at my side, pointed it at the painting, and shot a stream of blue-tinted energy at it. The painting, instead of hitting Mrs. Bennet, flew into the kitchen and landed harmlessly in the doorway. "Witch magic," I said to her in explanation. She wouldn't know any better. I was the only person in the room who could see and use fairy magic. My blade gleamed, blue on both sides. Its pleased hum in my hands reminded me it had been a while since I'd used it on a job. Weird, though. It usually glowed around fairies, not ghosts. I resheathed the sword, letting a shell-shocked Mrs. Bennet go. Colby lay against the wall, his eyes unfocused. Isabel checked his pulse, then stood, while I turned on the spot, looking for signs. "Vandals!" screamed Mrs. Bennet. "All of you, get out!" "That won't help." I climbed over the sofa. "Colby, can you see anything?" Even my unusual ability to hop over the veil didn't give me the spirit sight, and I doubted old Frank would be pleased if I crossed the veil to see. After the number of close calls over the last few months, I'd been playing it safe, only visiting the necromancer in the safety of their guild's summoning chamber. But in situations like this, a messenger on the other side was exactly what I needed. The blue glow from my sheathed sword grew brighter. Okay, that's really weird. The sword had never reacted to ghosts before. Wait. I ran to Colby. "Where's that spirit sensor of yours?" He groaned. I sighed inwardly and dug into the pocket of his ridiculously overlong coat. A remote-control-shaped device covered in dials bleeped and flashed blue. Spirit sensor. Apparently they were 10% accurate, but a damn sight more reliable than my own ability to see invisible things, so I waved the sensor around. It continued to beep. "Very helpful," I muttered to it. "This way." I followed the louder beeps until I stood facing the cabinet. Because no china flew at my head, I figured the spirit had moved, but it might be anywhere. Colby half sat up. "It's over there," he said hoarsely. Everyone turned to face the wall next to the trap. The armchair slid across the floor with Mrs. Bennet still lying on it. While she screamed, Isabel threw half a container of salt at the wall. "It's in the trap!" yelped Colby, then slid to the floor, groaning a little. "Isabel!" Once again, transparent bars appeared. A flickering shape materialized inside the trap, grayish and indistinct. "Nice one," I said to Isabel. I brushed salt from my jeans and tossed the spirit sensor back to Colby. Job done, and with minimal damage. Well, aside from the china, that is. Crash! I jumped. "Is there anyone upstairs?" I asked Mrs. Bennet. She sobbed, clinging to the armchair with both hands. "No? What is happening in my house?" Very good question. The trap had caught something, a transparent something. I turned to Colby to find him drooling against the wall. If there's a second ghost, we need another trap. More crashing sounded overhead. I shot Isabel an alarmed look and sprinted into the hall. My sword's glow grew brighter, illuminating the path through the shadows encasing the stairway. The sword only reacted to one thing: fairy magic. No freaking way. I took the stairs 3 at a time and ran into the upstairs landing. More crashes sounded from the bedroom. Whatever was in there plainly didn't care about drawing attention. But which spirit had we caught? The one throwing china, or the one lurking in the corner? Like it matters. Both shouldn't be here. I waved the salt container, keeping a safe distance from the door. Get out! Drawers flew left and right, spilling their contents on the carpet. A chair flew at me, and I ducked. It struck the inside of the door frame, its wooden legs breaking off. Another laugh followed, sending chills down my back. But I wouldn't be intimidated by a ghost. Very scary, I told it, sprinkling a line of salt along the doorway to stop it from getting out into the landing. Hell, the window was wide open. I'd need to go into the room to make sure it stayed in there. Someone bring more salt up here, I called downstairs, then ran into the bedroom, ducking another flying desk chair. I didn't have enough salt to cover the whole room, but I'd start with the window. I leaped onto the bed. Unsurprisingly, it slid along the thickly carpeted floor, but I'd already jumped off, rolling to a crouch. Most of the salt left my shaker in the process, covering the area in front of the window. The door slammed. Isabel? Laughter sounded. Something tugged at my hair, yanking me back onto the bed. Hey! I yelled. What the hell? This spirit had some nerve. Most couldn't muster enough energy to grab onto a living person either. All they could do was throw shit around. I tugged my hair free, scattering salt wildly into the air. Crap, I was all out. Instinctively, I grabbed my sword instead. Though what use it'd be against a ghost? Ivy Lane, hissed a whispering voice. I froze, hand on the hilt. What? You can speak. Impossible. Spirits usually weren't able to communicate. Hence the need for Ouija boards and other questionable tactics. Mrs. Bennet had only noticed her unwelcome visitor when it started destroying her upholstery. Ivy Lane. Yes? I stared around, but of course, no spirit sight. My sword glowed brighter than ever. Had someone screwed with the veil again? When the veil was thin, the usual rules smashed to pieces. Spirits were able to physically touch and kill and possess. A flickering shape appeared on the ceiling, upside down and grinning. 4 feet tall, its most dominant feature was its wide mouth full of sharpened teeth. A hobgoblin. Half a hobgoblin, rather. This was no ordinary ghost. It was a half-fairy. Unlike regular fairies, half-bloods passed over the veil when they died. Pure fairies could die, in very rare circumstances, but wouldn't leave a ghost behind in the way half-bloods might. Actual ghosts were pretty rare, because the necromancer guardians quickly sent any wayward spirits over the veil. A good job, considering how incompetent the living necromancers were. I knew it, I lied. What do you want with me? Entertainment. The hobgoblin gave me another upside-down grin. I've heard all about you, Ivy Lane. Yeah? Well, you shouldn't even be able to speak. Or do this. The bed rose into the air, sending me sliding onto the floor. At the same time, a sharp point burst through the carpet. I rolled over to avoid being stabbed. Another knife materialized, point first. Crap. crap. I jumped and ducked as the knives zoomed into the air, aiming for my head. My blade hummed as I unconsciously drew on its power to enhance my speed far beyond my normal human instincts. Holy shit! Most spirits definitely couldn't make physical objects move around like this. What the hell crazy power trip was this ghost on? "Am I entertaining you?" I yelled over my shoulder, jumping onto the dresser. It creaked and tipped, spilling half its contents onto the floor. Outside, someone thumped on the door. "Don't come in," I shouted, "unless you have a really good trap." Which, of course, nobody did. I withdrew my sword in a shower of blue light. The spirit, being half-blood, could see just how fearsome the blade looked with my fairy magic on full display. I moved it to face outwards and sent a pulse of energy at the knives. They dissolved, like I'd willed them out of existence. Fragments of metal littered the floor. I grinned. I could live without fairy magic most of the time, but I had to admit it was pretty damned awesome when it didn't nearly get me killed. I held the sword high, letting the bright blue light envelop the room. "This is your last warning." I'd used my magic to knock ghosts around when the veil had been low and death energy had been flying around everywhere. I didn't have a clue whether it'd work now. The half-hobgoblin bared its teeth at me. "That magic you wield is not meant for humans." "Tough shit. Get down from there. I can destroy anything you throw at me." The hobgoblin hissed. The bed threw itself at the wall, the door flew open, and Isabel ran into the room. She held up the spirit sensor. "Where is it?" "On the ceiling, but—" She hit the sensor. A jet of pure white shot out, and the hobgoblin let go of the ceiling light, screaming. The ghost writhed, turning solid, then exploded in a shower of green slime. "Oops," said Isabel. "I didn't know that'd happen." I turned to her slowly. Pushing slime-soaked hair from my eyes, I asked, "What was that?" Necromancer emergency backup weapon. I think it has concentrated salt in it. So, that's what happens when you use it on a ghost. I did wonder." She gave me a shaky smile. "Now that's an idea for a new tripwire spell." "Ghostbusters, eat your heart out." I shook slime off my sleeve. Or ectoplasm, I guess. How the hell are we meant to explain this to the Mage Council? Chapter 2. "This is a fine mess, isn't it?" said Drake. The copper-haired fire mage grinned at the stern-faced Lady Granville, who stood at his side. This case must rank pretty high in the Mage Lord's list of major screw-ups, if 2 members of the Mage Council were here. Lady Granville was notorious for being a stickler for rules and order, but Drake was one of the few mages whom I'd befriended since I'd started working with them. "I expected Vance," I said. "I'm insulted." Drake bounced on the balls of his feet. "It won't kill you to file your report with me instead. Vance is busy with clients." I didn't doubt that. While Isabel and I had struggled to keep our business running without having to ask the mages for funding, the mages themselves had been overrun lately. "I expect a full report," said Lady Granville. "What exactly is that?" She indicated the ectoplasm on my sleeves, wearing the expression she usually did around me, like I was something distasteful which had wandered onto her path. "Ectoplasm," I said. "From when the ghost exploded." "This was supposed to be a routine job," said Lady Granville. "I was under the impression the 3 of you knew what you were doing." "We did," I said ineffectually. "We were told to prepare for 1 spirit. We didn't expect to be attacked by 2. It shouldn't have had that much kinetic power. Most spirits can't so much as lift a teaspoon." I looked at Colby, who'd set up his necromantic equipment while waiting for his boss to show up. "Vandals and madmen!" screeched Mrs. Bennet from the corner of the wrecked living room, where she waited on the sofa with an ever-patient Isabel. She'd been shrieking incoherently for the last 20 minutes while we waited for help. My attempts to clear up the mess had only made things worse. The bedroom was covered in ectoplasm. The furniture and carpets were ruined, and broken china lay everywhere. Luckily, the majors would be paying compensation, assuming we gave the council a good enough explanation. It was clearly stated in the job description that you were to deal with a potentially dangerous spirit in as professional a manner as possible. Lady Granville ignored the necromancer kid, focusing all her attention on me. First Mrs. Bennet, now her. We did, right up until it multiplied itself and started smashing plates over our heads. There were 2 spirits. One's in the trap, the other exploded. Lady Granville's eyes narrowed while Drake snickered loudly. I want compensation, screamed Mrs. Bennet. You'll get it, you old toad. Lady Granville glared at me. Drake continued to laugh. I gave him the evil eye and turned to our necromancer assistant. Any results? The veil tests as normal, said Colby. No anomalies, suggested Isabel. Yeah, that. He rubbed the back of his head. Isabel had given him a healing spell before concussion set in, but he seemed to have forgotten half his incantations. I don't get it. There was one spirit, but another must have sneaked in when our backs were turned. You definitely didn't see anything, I asked. No, you did. I met Lady Granville's suspicious stare. Fairies can choose to reveal themselves to whoever they want to. Apparently the same rule applies to ghost ones. It was a half-hobgoblin. They're not too smart whether they're alive or dead. Looks like it spotted a rogue spirit and decided to join in the fun. Isabel gave me a look that suggested she didn't see through my bravado. If you counted Mrs. Bennet, we had enough freaked-out people in the room already. I'd rather not add to the madness even more by speculating on how a half-fairy had packed a magical punch like that. How in hell could any ghost do this much damage so far from the ley line? It was looking for you. It knew who you were. I shoved the thoughts aside to confront later. Did you ask who the other spirit was? Colby shook his head. It disappeared before I could ask. I'd missed that part. While I'd been doing battle with the fairy ghost, Colby had pulled out his rare necromancer talent and banished the other spirit. Problem was, we had nobody left to question. I'd have to book an appointment to speak to the necromancers again. So, we don't know what could have possibly caused enough of an energy surge to draw 2 spirits here? Not my magic. I hadn't used it until the second spirit appeared. Spectral energy is drawn to particular spots, said Colby. Usually a violent event leaves an impression, and it causes the spirit to stick around. Has anyone died here lately? Are you accusing me of murder, boy? Screamed Mrs. Bennet. No. Colby blanched. Never mind. He scooted away from the remains of the trap, visibly shaking. I'll ask my boss. Lady Granville stepped forward. The mage lords will gladly provide compensation for the damages. It's required that we return to the guild to process reports. Can't we wait and find out who the spirit was? I didn't particularly want to talk to Lord Evander, but it bugged the crap out of me that 2 violent spirits had come here, and we didn't know why. No, said Lady Granville. Our part in this mission is over. Figures. She stuck so rigidly to the mage code, we had to follow every item exactly to the letter. Otherwise, she did her best to stop us doing anything useful. The one exception was the mage lord's leader, but he wasn't here. I think we should wait for the necromancers to show up. Drake waved at Colby. I disagree, said Lady Granville. We need to file our reports within an hour of the incident. We shouldn't disturb this lady any longer. Vandals! hissed Mrs. Bennet. "I can't get a handle on the spirit," said Colby. "It'll have disappeared." He sounded genuine, though the looks he kept darting towards the door made it clear he wanted out. Lady Granville frowned at Drake until he traipsed after her. Isabel and I followed, resigned. No point in hanging about here now the spirits had gone. "You're really going to come to the meeting covered in ectoplasm?" asked Drake. "Yes." The first time I'd shown up to meet with the Mage Council covered in blood and monster guts, everyone except Vance and Drake had looked so scandalized that I'd almost cracked up laughing. This was all the entertainment I got for sitting in tedious council meetings. The cold January air slapped us in the face as we crossed Mrs. Bennet's immaculate garden to the Major's cars parked outside. I huddled in my thick coat, turning back to the house out of habit. The thin sheen of blue-tinged fairy magic hovered over the upstairs window. I squinted, frowning. Death energy fueled spirits. As I'd seen more than once, death energy and my own fairy magic weren't all that different. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold took hold of me. The last ghost I'd seen had promised he'd kill me, whatever it took, and return to life. Calder's voice whispered in my ear, "I can promise you that. I'll kill your mage first." "Fairy ghosts," said Isabel around a mouthful of toast, watching me across the desk in our office. "Seriously, why does everything weird come after you?" "Very good question." I blew on my coffee to cool it down a little, wrapping my hands around the mug for warmth. When our former neighbors moved out of the upstairs flat, their last act of defiance was to leave the heating broken and a leaking hole in the ceiling. Now we'd converted the main room into our office, we spent a lot of time sitting in the cold. "Because I'm fairy bait." "Even for dead ones." Isabel shook her head over the stack of papers in front of her. "Do you want to know how much the damages were?" "Nope. The majors have already offered to pay." I leaned over the desk to see the papers. "What's that for?" "Risk reports, logging, more complicated crap the majors asked for." Yay. In order to prove to our landlord that we planned to use the upstairs flat as an office and not to hold house parties, we'd been forced to develop a more organized system for paperwork. Usually I handled phone calls while Isabel dealt with the paperwork. But now the majors had got involved and I was technically their employee, I'd been landed with filing a detailed report on last night's clusterfuck of a job. Luckily we don't have too much of a backlog yet, because we haven't had any new clients for 2 weeks, said Isabel. "It was Christmas," I said. "We can do a January special or something. Hire us to find a missing heirloom and we'll throw in an exorcism for free." Isabel snorted. "I'm swearing off exorcisms for a while. Are the necromancers really overrun?" "Sounds like it, from what Vance said. Maybe the ghosts of Christmas past and present got lost in transit." It was a week after New Year's Day, aka prime moment for broken resolutions and family arguments. And wayward ghosts, apparently. "If they did, I'm not exorcising them." Isabel reshuffled the papers. "Good luck calculating the costs to remove ectoplasm from carpets. Apparently the cleansing spell didn't work." "Figures," I muttered. "Vance is coming over in a bit. I'll get this crap sorted out." I dashed off responses to the questions listed on our records, then stopped and chewed on my pen. This whole case was bizarre. Not only was it all but impossible for a ghost to cause that much damage, the half-hobgoblin had appeared out of nowhere, without the necromancer in the room even seeing it or sensing it. True, Colby wasn't the most skilled of necromancers. He might have overlooked the second ghost, like his spirit sensor had. But the spirit hadn't acted like a confused, recently deceased ghost. He'd hunted me down for a reason, and that meant bad, bad news. I fidgeted, looking around our small office. Damn Lady Granville for ruining my day. Sometimes, okay, most of the time, I appreciated the benefits of working for the Mage Lords. I hadn't been above the poverty line long enough to have forgotten the struggle to make ends meet. Except all I really wanted was Vance, without the council attached. I'd started to revise my attitude towards them, but after years of resenting the mages for spurning me when I'd returned from Faerie, desperate and alone, old habits dug their heels in. My phone buzzed. Before I'd had the chance to read Vance's message, the doorbell rang downstairs. "He could just teleport inside," said Isabel. "He insists on doing it this way." Some women might find it romantic if they had a boyfriend who could literally appear right behind them whenever he wanted. Unfortunately, my experiences with the fairies had given me a permanent act first, ask questions later response when people crept up on me, and I'd nearly stabbed Vance a couple of times. I drank the rest of my coffee and went downstairs. Erwin the Pisky flew out of our flat, bouncing off the walls. The bugger had got into the mulled wine again. Isabel and I had brought some home on Christmas Eve, not knowing it had 10 times the effect on Piskies, and we'd had to shut him out of the flat until he calmed down. Sidestepping the Pisky, I walked down the sparsely carpeted hall to open the door for Vance. "Hey," I said. "Hey yourself." He looked good. Okay, he always did. His long coat fit snugly across his well-muscled shoulders, while his neatly combed hair had grown a little, curling at the edges over his grey eyes. He was tall enough to block the cold air from getting inside, which was more than welcome at the moment. Pity he'd probably come with bad news. Sure enough, Vance said, "I wanted to warn you. Lord Evander wants to meet us." I groaned. "Has he found a way to blame me for last night yet?" "Not yet." "You're really selling this meeting to me." He wrapped an arm around my back. "You'll get the pleasure of my company as well." "You're very pleasant company." I kissed him lightly. "But the necromancers aren't. What's Lord Evander got to say about last night?" "He's waiving all responsibility for the second ghost. Colby told him it was a fairy." "Seriously? I thought the rule of necromancers was that they dealt with all ghosts, not just human ones. The Guardians do." "Yes," said Vance. "I did find it intriguing that last night was the first case of multiple spirits they've had in months." "I'd find it more intriguing if I hadn't had ectoplasm explode all over me." "You had a more exciting evening than me. I had to sit in on a hearing for a guy who stole a witch's motorcycle. It backfired and he ended up with a nasty case of blisters." I snorted. "Sounds fun. That's why you never mess with a witch." "Speaking of, your trap nearly got me on the way in." "It's meant to react to sudden movements." Without the shifters living upstairs, Isabel and I were on our own, which meant Isabel was alone when I was at Vance's place, and I was alone when she went to coven meetings and Vance was busy. Considering fairies had murdered people right outside our flat, you might wonder why we hadn't moved. Well, I'd attract fairies wherever I lived, so I stayed. Our security was second only to the mages. I was more than a little suspicious nothing dramatic had gone wrong over the holidays. I'd spent Christmas and New Year's at the mage's place, because I didn't have any family, and Vance's surviving relatives weren't on speaking terms with him. Isabel usually spent the day with the coven, while I stayed home, pulling a lonely cracker with Erwin the Pisky. Then Isabel would come home at midnight, and we'd drink mulled wine. On the plus side, I got to spend time with Vance this year. On the minus side, the manor had been overflowing with stuck-up mages who looked at me like I was an ogre in human clothing, or outright ignored me. Still, Vance was more than enough to make up for it. I smiled at him, my bad mood evaporating even with the knowledge that Lord Evander would doubtless be a total dick to us. One perk of being with Vance? No need to walk or take the bus. He took my arm and we'd reappear in another destination. He didn't strictly need to be touching me to transport us, but I took the opportunity to snuggle closer to him. Vance trailed a hand through my hair. "You're friendly today." "A half-hobgoblin ghost nearly stabbed me to death last night." He stopped stroking my hair. "What?" "Didn't you read the report?" His thumb traced the edge of my cheek. "No. I only heard the basics from Lady Granville. I thought she'd told me everything important." "I'm not exactly a priority with her." He moved back, and his eyes darkened a little. "You should be." I shrugged. "I'll get over it. I have the papers if she wants them." "We'll drop them off later, after we've dealt with Lord Evander." The necromancer's place looked like the backdrop for a low-budget horror movie. Soot-black bricks formed a 3-story building beside an iron gate leading into a cemetery. A small brick building inside the gates was my usual destination, where I met with Frank, the necromancer ghost. I'd only been inside their headquarters once. My conversations with Lord Evander tended to be brief and ended up with everyone being insulted. Vance didn't need to ring the doorbell. Lord Evander stood on the doorstep with Colby at his side. The apprentice studied his feet, avoiding our eyes. "Here we go," I muttered. Lord Evander walked over to meet us. He was a short, unimpressive man, with one of those forgettable faces, who probably wouldn't look all that different as a ghost. His suit was more threadbare than the Mage Lord's, and had what looked like ectoplasm on the sleeves. "Having trouble with ghosts?" I asked cheerily.
"If you even think of blaming me for yesterday's incident, you won't be welcome here anymore."
"You break my heart, Lord Evander." I stopped myself before I got carried away. "In all seriousness, you're the ghost expert in town. None of us could see what the hell was going on until it was too late."
"A half-fairy ghost isn't my responsibility."
"I'm an ambassador for the living ones, not the dead," I said. "The half-fairy's chief will say the same." Which basically meant the mages would have to clear up the mess. Or rather, the mages' freelancers. Isabel and I would be on our own if another ghost showed up.
"The spirit targeted you."
That didn't take long. "It was a prankster spirit. Not all that different from a poltergeist, but I don't have the spirit's sight. Colby does." The young apprentice winced. Lord Evander gave both of us a filthy look.
"We're talking about a specific case that Ivy here was hired to investigate. She had the expertise on the half-fairy you encountered."
"I wouldn't call myself an expert, considering the ghost in question nearly skewered me. No ordinary spirit would have access to that much energy, according to your laws, right?"
"None of us have ever encountered a half-fairy ghost before. Only one of my necromancers has, and he has no memory of the experience."
He leveled both of us with an accusing look. Oh. 2 necromancers had had up-close and personal encounters with half-blood ghosts. One had died at my hands, after being possessed. The other, Vance had stabbed and nearly killed for the same reason. There had been other necromancers present, but I tried to avoid bringing up that incident if I could help it. Besides, the veil had been down, so the spirits had been able to physically materialize and use their elemental magic. Neither of those rules had applied to the spirit we'd encountered yesterday. Unfortunately, the actual necromancer rulebook was only available to members of the guild. The rest of us had to use guesswork. With half-fairy ghosts, I'd wager there wasn't a clear set of guidelines.
"Half-fairy or not, the law regarding ghosts still stands," said Vance. "The case was dealt with, but if I were you, I'd come up with a solution if it happens again." "If you told the truth in your report, Colby eradicated the ghost," said Lord Evander. "That means we owe you nothing. The ghost is gone, the incident behind us, and if you ever want to set foot in here again, you'll quit badgering me and take the case to the half-fairies instead." I gritted my teeth. If he wouldn't do his damn job, I'd have advised him to step down and let someone else take the position.
but as far as he was concerned, the necromancers were none of my business. "I'll speak to the chief, and he'll send me back here," I said. "It's like carrying messages between two squabbling children. Why don't the two of you meet?" Outrage crossed the necromancer's face. "You have some cheek."
"I think that's an excellent idea," said Vance. "Maybe the two of you can come to an agreement."
I bit my lip to avoid laughing. Vance must have been really bored at the council meeting to risk screwing with the necromancers, considering he'd warned me against doing exactly this. Though I'd pay to see the outcome. "Absolutely not!" Lord Venter all but yelled the words. "If I hear you're damaging my reputation, Ivy Lane." I snorted. His reputation was already 6 feet under. Pun intended. People only hired necromancers from here because there was no alternative. When you had a poltergeist wrecking your house, options were pretty limited. Everyone in town with the spirit side had joined the guild, and the one reliable necromancer I'd met was a ghost himself. On days like this, I'd sell my superpowered sword to be rid of my connection to the necromancers. There were few perks to being linked with death, especially since one person on the other side would dearly love to drag me over with him for good.
"Enough,"
Vance cut in.
"Have you spoken to Lord Sidney?" "I will speak to him myself, before you do."
"Fine." Speaking to the necromancer ghost wasn't urgent. Because the half-hobgoblin had been blasted with the spirit eradication device, he'd been sent flying over the Vale, and might not even be in the city's section of death anymore. You couldn't destroy a ghost, because they didn't have a physical form. I'd never got a conclusive answer on where the ectoplasm came from, but the ghost was long gone. I doubted Frank would have seen him. There was, however, someone who might have, when he was still alive. "If anything else happens, Lord Evander, I expect you to let me in." I turned to Vance. He got it. We disappeared before the necromancer could utter another word.
"I'm starting to think you want me to accompany you just to use my dramatic exits,"
said Vance as we landed at the roadside. "Nah." I let go of his arm. "Did you see his face, though?" He chuckled.
"It wouldn't surprise me if you pushed Lord Evander into early retirement."
"How'd you figure out my evil plan?" I grinned. It'd be better for everyone if he did retire. I mean, anyone's got to be better than him.
"Not necessarily," said Vance. "The Necromancy Guild has a history of poor leadership."
That explains why they screwed up so many times with the Vale. I looked around. Acacia Road. We're meeting Chieftain Tave now.
He might know something.
He's even less likely to accept responsibility. I don't know if half-fairies can see half-blood ghosts, but he'll clam up if I so much as mention death. Half-blooded fairies weren't born with immortality the way pure-blooded fairies were. True, nobody was truly immortal. Even a pure she couldn't survive an iron sword to the heart, for instance. But they were wicked hard to kill, and didn't die from natural causes, unless they came to this realm or were exiled to the Grey Vale. Reminding the chief of the time he'd nearly died would probably kill all the progress I'd made towards reconciling his people and the mages. Which wasn't a whole lot, but hey, nobody had murdered one another over the holidays. I considered that a win.
"You haven't spoken to the chief recently?"
"Not like he'd forget all our arguments," I said. "He won't know the rules on death and half-bloods."
"True. He doesn't want you waving his mortality in his face."
"Then I'll wave my sword in his face. Suppose it can't hurt to ask." My magic made me untouchable, in theory. But with the dead coming after me? My precarious position as liaison between the mages and the half-fairies didn't mean a thing if the ghost who wanted me dead made a reappearance. Chapter 3. I'd only been to half-blood territory a handful of times, but it always looked completely different. Today, winter was in full swing. Icicles hung from the gate. A coating of frost decorated the hedge, and someone had strung up fairy lights made of live piskies holding ignited spells. Now there was a safety hazard if I ever saw one. The piskies themselves didn't look unhappy with the arrangement. One even waved at me. Weirdos. 2 guards wearing armor waited inside. The chief had had enough of Vance and me casually walking into his territory, so he had 24-hour guards in place these days. Their attire was a weird combination of medieval and modern. Thin, lightweight grey armor over thick, plain, dark-coloured clothes. Both were male and inhumanly pretty, their faces perfectly symmetrical in a way that was more unsettling than attractive. Which summed up the fairies, to be honest. I waved at the guards. "Hey, Bob." 2 pairs of eyes narrowed at me. It was a running joke, only I found funny. Since every fairy guard here called me the Human, as though they didn't know my name, I'd taken to calling every single one of them Bob. It drove the chief out of his mind. "Mage Lord?" The guards nodded to Vance and looked right past me. As they parted, I made sure to stride ahead, my sword slightly withdrawn to reveal the faint glow of winter magic around it. Half the territory had been turned into a giant ice rink, which replaced the area once covered by lawns. Ice-crowned trees stood along the other side of the path, decorated by twinkling lights. Snow drifted through the air. Magic or not, its cold burn against my cheeks felt real enough. The bitter air cut through my coat, and despite the open atmosphere, the whistling wind made me think of echoey corridors in ancient castles and dungeons miles underground. The guards, with their armor and weapons, didn't help. I clenched and unclenched my fists, more to stop myself losing sensation in my fingers than anything. The guards walking alongside Vance and me parted to allow us through into a small clearing between leafless trees etched in frost. The chief stood in the center, on a higher bit of ground which made him stand taller than me, though not as high as Vance's 6'2" frame. He'd bought a new crown, silver with leaf patterns. Or maybe it was a Christmas present. Icicles hung from the sides, and his staff shimmered with green summer magic. He sneezed. So much for the intimidating impression. As a summer fairy, he probably wasn't pleased with the state of his territory. "A little chilly in here, isn't it?" Actually, I was freezing my ass off. The Seelie half-fairies probably were too. "Ivy Lane," he said. "Mage Lord, what do you want?" "We're here because a half-fairy ghost tried to kill me last night. Have you seen anything weird lately?" The chief's breath hissed out, clouding the air. "No." I raised an eyebrow. "Care to qualify? Because the necromancers won't take an ounce of responsibility, and I'm a little lost on what half-fairy ghosts can actually do. It used glamour to reveal itself to me. That's only happened when the veil was thinning." A short pause. "You came here to ask me questions only a necromancer can answer. I know nothing about the veil, and I intend to keep it that way." "You're a half-fairy," I said. "A half-hobgoblin tried to kill me. Know any who died recently?" He stared at me a moment. "A half-hobgoblin died in our jail yesterday afternoon." My heart sank. What? Who was he? If he was jailed, it meant... The drug. He took the drug, didn't he? "If you'd allow me to speak," said the chief. "Yes, he took the drug. He was one of the half-bloods who claimed to have no memory of the attacks, and anything he did under its influence. I kept him jailed because he killed 2 people. Believe it or not, I do know how to police my own." Oh. That was actually a smart move. Not one I'd have expected of him. "So he died... how?" "Another prisoner. We keep them in separate cells, but the ones with stronger magic occasionally break out."
You don't use iron cages? We aren't barbaric. The chief's eyes narrowed. Iron poisoning is equivalent to torture in our eyes. A small group of troublemaking prisoners escaped their cells. In the ruckus, they let several others out. 3 were killed before the guards subdued them. Damn. I looked at Vance. None of them got away, did they? No, the chief said firmly. Good, said Vance. Have you considered the possibility the drug might be involved again? That's what I thought. Unfortunately. They didn't take any drugs, said the chief. We tested everyone in the jail after the incident, including the dead. So, who died? I'm not obliged to disclose the details. You have your answers, and this ghost has nothing to do with me. One of your fairies died and came after me, I said. He didn't have anything in particular to say about me in jail, did he? I'm not in charge of the prison. Then take me to someone who is. Crap. This has got way complicated, fast. Need I remind you of your agreement with the Mage Guild? Said Vance. If we believe one of yours to be acting in a manner that places the rest of the town in danger, we will take action. I haven't the slightest idea what you're accusing me of, said the chief. If you want to talk your way into the jail, though, it's your prerogative. Where is the jail? Follow the path to the left out of the clearing, said the chief. Good luck explaining yourselves to the guards. I'm shaking. Well, shivering. I could hazard a guess what kind of monsters he had guarding the jail, but he'd forgotten that winter magic gave me a boost. I pulled my sword out slightly, enough to reveal the dazzling blue glow. Pleasure seeing you, Chieftain Tave. Consider our agreement, Vance added, sweeping after me. He could pull off a dramatic exit, but my new magic was a pretty neat effect. Even the chief's ogre guards kept away from me. Left, I muttered, turning down the path and rubbing my hands together to get some feeling back into my fingertips. I wished I had a long coat like Vance did. What do you reckon he's got guarding the jail? Ogres, trolls, or chimeras? Probably not a chimera, said Vance. Wish there was a way to get the truth out of the prisoners who helped Calder, I muttered. Trick them, said Vance. I think you'd be better at it than I am. I blinked, surprised. Me? Diplomatic? No, threatening. Hello, Mr. I summon swords from thin air. He gave me a sideways grin. I suspect a subtler tactic might work better. Depends who he has guarding the place. If Unseelie territory was this cold, they could keep it. My feet, ears, and nose were completely numb, and my boots crunched in the snow, padding the way along the narrow path. Trees crowded either side, full of creepy faces and snatching hands. Vance glared at them, conjuring up a hand-and-a-half iron blade, and sent them scurrying away. The wildness of the area set my spine prickling. You don't think he's sending us into a trap, do you? He wouldn't dare, Vance said tightly. He knows the 2 of us can take him to pieces, and the rest of his fairies do too. Not necessarily. I didn't think any of the pure fairies lived here with the half-bloods, though I might be wrong. A keening wail struck up, piercing my eardrums. Ow! What's that? Vance didn't stop, but lifted the blade higher. I pulled my own sword out. Haven't a clue. The noise went on, high and sad, like a dirge crossed with an opera singer, several miles off key. Ouch! I put my hands over my ears. Coldness slid through me, under skin, under bone. Who's there? Vance said sharply. The path bent and twisted through the trees, showing us nothing of what might be ahead, so neither of us saw the fairy on the path until we almost walked into her. She crouched there, completely still, except her mouth. The
awful song poured from her throat, battering at me, sending me reeling. Holy crap! I had to force my legs to stay in position, instinctively conjuring up a magic shield. Ow! Vance stopped dead next to me.
What manner of Faerie are you?
Words shot through my head. Winter. Powerful. Death magic. Banshee. You're half banshee? I guessed. The wailing stopped. Humans, said the woman. Girl, really. She was all of 16, though a few inches taller than me. Maybe 5'8" or so. Her black hair spilled to her shoulders, her full lips pouted, and she had the sort of face that would make most human men fall at her feet, unless they passed out from hearing her singing. What are you doing? Death, she said. What about it? The words came out through frosted lips. Damn, she packed a magical punch. Her song had knocked me still, and she wasn't even full-blooded. Someone here will die. She cast a dramatic look over her shoulder. A squat building stood at the path's end, covered in a thick layer of snow. Gaps suggested brickwork underneath. Creeping trees grew close, crowding over the roof. Is that the jail? Didn't someone already die?
Yesterday,
said Vance. Didn't sound like the Banshee woman had knocked him senseless. Good. Unless you're running behind schedule. Are you mocking me, human? Hissed the half-Banshee. Nope. And I have a name. Ivy. What's yours? Allison, said the Banshee. Would you like a taste of my death magic? Got plenty of death magic right here, I said. We're here to speak to the guards running this place about yesterday's incident. I'm the guard. Huh? What? You serenade the prisoners with death songs? My song is a warning that someone will soon die. The coldness intensified, the air thickening.
If that was a threat, said Vance, I'd step aside. Now.
Mage Lord. There was nothing remotely respectful in her tone. I've heard about you, Ivy Lane, she added to me. Death has its marks on you. I didn't rise to her bait. Who's going to die? Please say me. Because when I passed over the veil, that was death in a sense. I'd rather have that than another murder. My gift never tells me who the victim will be. Someone nearby will die within the next 3 days. Nice, I said. Maybe you need to look at your security if a bunch of prisoners got out yesterday. Her hands warped and twisted, turning into black talons. Vance stepped forward.
You're required to answer our questions. A half-fairy who died here yesterday attacked Ivy.
I clenched my hand over my sword hilt. Yeah, and I'm not happy about it. Who let them out? Did you kill everyone who escaped? None survived. She waved her talons. One was stained in blood. Ugh. And did any of them mention magical drugs? Every one of my anti-fairy instincts went into overdrive just looking at the Banshee. I'd class her as the type who'd laugh as the mortal world fell. Did she know Calder? No, said Allison. They didn't have much to say. She laughed. Creepy.
We have reason to connect last night with the events 3 months ago, said Vance. The chief told us nobody in the jail remembered anything of the night they were drugged, but if any of them were complicit, we need to know.
If they were, they're dead. The Banshee lifted her talon to her mouth. Her tongue flicked out, lapping at the blood. Ew. I took care of them. You should leave. I'm getting hungry. Ack. Cannibalism is against the law. I never liked human rules.
I drew my sword in a spray of blue light. Energy surged up and smacked into her talons. She snarled in fury.
What was that for?
Being creepy and weird, I said.
Go away, she growled. Both of you. Leave me alone.
With pleasure, said Vance, and we disappeared in a whirl of blue light.
Whoa!
I staggered away from him.
That was a hell of an encore. Evil bitch.
We'd landed outside the hedges bordering half-blood territory. I walked to the gate.
Oi, Chief, get some new guards.
He's not there, said Vance. I shook my head.
What kind of idiot leaves a death fairy in charge of a prison?
A half-banshee, said Vance. They're from Winter. I thought only exiles fed on death. Even after 3 months together, Vance hadn't heard all my tales about my stint in Faerie.
Yeah, banshees don't eat up death energy, I said. They just have the impulse to scream or sing whenever someone's going to die. Guess they eat humans too, but that won't get you exiled. Fairies don't see humans as important.
She did mention having death magic. They're shape changers, aren't they?
Yeah. I hoped you were immune to her charms.
The singing rather spoiled the effect. And the talons.
Lucky you've never heard me sing. I spoke lightly, but the chilling effect of the banshee's words hadn't gone away. Someone will die within 3 days. She might have meant anyone in the jail, but my mind kept jumping over to Vance. Anyway, I said, what now? Vance pulled out his phone.
Lady Granville's called a meeting in 10 minutes. She might have some information from the files on last night's case.
Great. Another meeting with Lady Stick-Up-Her-Ass. The hobgoblin might have been acting alone, but I'd take nothing at face value, especially after the banshee. If what she said was true, there might be more half-fairy ghosts wandering around. I doubted the chief would give us their identities after today.
Try to hold your tongue in the meeting, said Vance. She wasn't happy with you last night.
She can't have been, if she decided not to tell you the goblin threw knives at me. Never mind. I'll behave this time. He nodded.
We have the gala tonight, and then...
Shit.
What?
The gala. I forgot. He looked at me.
You didn't have other plans, did you?
A date with you? The corner of his mouth turned up.
The gala counts as a date.
Not when other people are there. Call me petty, but we'd hardly had a moment of just us since before Christmas. The manor was always packed with mages I didn't know, and Vance was so busy organizing ways to keep them occupied that we only had alone time after dark. Admittedly, I had nothing to complain about in that department, but still, quiet time during daylight hours would be nice.
We're closed to clients today because of the gala, if you want to stay after the meeting. We might have some time for training before the guests arrive.
Training? I arched an eyebrow.
Use your own definition.
His teeth grazed my neck, nipping at my earlobe.
Enough incentive to sit in on a meeting with Lady Granville.
You aren't distracting me.
Really?
My shoulders slumped. Yeah, all right. On the condition that you and I get alone time, and I get Drake back for burying me in snow the other day. The mage lord grinned at me.
That can be arranged.
Chapter 4. I managed to hold my tongue through Lady Granville's lecture on inappropriate conduct, but lost it when she reached the part about the half-hobgoblin and how it was apparently Colby's fault we had no evidence left. I don't blame the kid for panicking, I said. Not like any of the rest of us had a gun that could make a spirit explode. He wouldn't have had time to set up another trap before someone got hurt. The fairy spirit was too far from the first trap.
If a more experienced necromancer had accompanied you, it would never have happened, said Lady Granville. The mages should never have been involved anyway. It's not our area.
Yeah, you'd say that. I let my gaze travel across the 5 leading members of the Mage Council. At one end sat Lady Penrose, a woman of maybe 40 or so, with thick-framed glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, which amplified the disapproving expression she always seemed to wear when looking at me. Apparently, she was a powerful kinetic and an expert in setting wards. She, along with her neighbour, Lord Carlisle, had never spoken a word to me. Lord Carlisle I thought I'd recognised, even though he was a plain, pale man in a suit and tie I wouldn't have picked out of a crowd. Not knowing where I'd seen him before had bothered me for weeks, until I saw him use his ability on a client from hell who refused to leave the manor. He'd waved a hand, and the kid had walked outside like he'd been hypnotised. Apparently it wasn't mind control, it was full body control, and Lord Carlisle was the mage I'd once seen make someone explode. Note to self, don't get on his bad side. Behind those two were the other council members, a cluster of men and women vying for the next position on the council. And then there was Lady Granville, clad in an expensive suit the colour of mould and with an expression to match, who made no secret of the fact she hated me. All in all, I'd never been in the same room as so many obnoxious asshats, and I'd worked for the freaking mercenary guild for 10 years. The only mage lord aside from Vance I got along with was Drake, who at least seemed to find meetings as dull as I did.
Sounds like the Necros have an undead problem.
Drake lounged in his seat, calculated for maximum annoyance. In a room full of stiff-backed people in suits, he and I stuck out like sore thumbs. Vance, of course, was in uptight mage lord mode, though admittedly Lady Granville had read him the riot act too, for letting us go in last night without backup. Kind of unfair, not to mention ridiculous, because Vance was technically the one in charge. But Lady Granville's ambitions to take Vance's position as head of the council were widely known. Small wonder she didn't like me. Technically, they hired Isabel and me, I said. That spirit was a nasty piece of work. Someone needed to get rid of it. I wasn't entirely sure how I'd ended up defending the necromancers, but it sounded like poor Colby would end up taking the heat for last night, which wasn't fair either.
Ivy, whatever your arrangement with the necromancers is, said Lady Granville, your job is to do whatever the mage lords tell you to.
Nobody gave me orders last night, I retaliated. And we don't stand for insubordination, Lady Granville added. My hands clenched at my sides. There was a dangerous spirit. I confronted it to stop it hurting anyone. Fairies are my area, as I've told you. Multiple times. If a mage lord had been present last night, I'd have done as they asked. Okay, I was lying through my teeth now. If she'd told me to stay put when the ghost was smashing plates and throwing picture frames at us, I'd have ignored her and tried to put it down before someone got hurt.
Speaking of fairies, said Lady Granville, you should have consulted the Mage Council before going into half-blood territory yesterday. I gave her permission. Vance cut in. We discovered that the ghost Ivy encountered last night was murdered in the Half-Fairies jail yesterday. There may be others.
Did you question the prisoners? No, because a banshee tried to kill us, I said. Also, all the prisoners involved were dead. Like I said, insubordination. Lady Granville looked around at the others, as though expecting them to agree with her. How the hell is it meant to be my fault? I said. A banshee tried to kill us, pretty unambiguous there. Knowing your history for causing trouble, I'm guessing you provoked it. Her, I said automatically. She's a half-banshee. They aren't human, Ivy. Oh boy. The problem was, I didn't think of the half-fairies as inhuman. Sure, I hated the chief, and most of the half-bloods I'd met had been hostile at best. but I didn't think they deserved to be left out of laws defining what counted as human. Shifters weren't, and they transformed into beasts every month at the full moon. Maybe not, I allowed, but it wasn't me who pissed the banshee off, nor the ghost. Be that as it may, said Lady Granville, we're in a difficult position with regard to the Mage Council. The other districts are asking questions, particularly about that creature which escaped. My heart sank. The giant dragon, the shifter's god, had escaped its cage thanks to the Lady of the Tree. She'd set it free as revenge on humanity, and she'd done it on Calder's orders. I'd managed to lure the dragon into the Grey Veil and put it under a sleeping spell. One of the perks of my newfound power. I could speak invocations, immensely powerful spells only she were able to use under normal circumstances, without dying, as I almost had the first time I'd done it. In the Grey Veil, I could use my magic to create and destroy, like any she-lord. I didn't care about that power, and I could guess what was coming next. You used that talisman, said Lady Granville. What you and Lord Colton did goes against our policy. I'm not comfortable with the idea of keeping an unfamiliar Faerie talisman in our stores. You want me to move it? My voice rose in surprise. She hadn't mentioned the talisman since the month after Vance and I had sealed it away. There's nowhere with better security than the storeroom. Undead attacked it this morning, said Lady Granville. Vance looked at her sharply. Nobody informed me of this. I was told the dead were sealed where they belong. They are. Lady Granville surveyed the council. 2 undead wandered over from Highgate Cemetery. A chill took hold of me, like grasping fingers. I thought the storehouse was warded against evil intent. It is, said Lady Granville. Which is why the undead couldn't get near. We took them down first. It does bother me that they'd target the safe house to begin with. Yeah, I muttered. There's nowhere else we can put the talisman. Just send over more guards and increase the wards. Throw in some misleading spells. Misleading spells? Asked Lady Granville. Ask the Laurel Coven. Isabel makes spells which confuse and misdirect fairies who come near our flat. We also have a trench filled with cacti and a bunch of tripwire spells which cause trespassers to develop painful sores in sensitive areas. Drake laughed loudly. Nobody else did. Come on, it's genius, he said to Lady Granville. We ought to put them at the gates, too. Not for the first time. I'd surprised the mages with Isabel's ideas. Really, they ought to hire her for security. Enough, Lady Granville said sharply. We'll take it under consideration. Are the undead dispatched? Asked Vance. I want to look myself. There's nothing to see, Lady Granville told him. Undead don't leave traces that can be tracked with a witch's spell. Couldn't you use a modified tracker spell? I asked. Last night's rain washed away all traces. Damn. We'll re-evaluate the plan for the talisman if anything else happens, said Lady Granville. I have to speak out against your decision to bring it into our city without telling the rest of the council first. She looked at Vance, not me. He met her steely gaze calmly. The rest of the council would have voted in favor. Like Ivy said, there's no safer place than the stores. Our safety was paramount. Why bring it into this realm in the first place? Because the alternative was leaving it in the Grey Veil, I said. That's how the Lady of the Tree got hold of the sword herself. Velkas used it, and I left it behind. I didn't know it contained his magic. Won't be making that mistake again. So it was you. I should have guessed. Ivy killed her, Vance said warningly. She did what none of the rest of us could. I've already told you my thoughts on this. Warmth spread through my icy-cold limbs. Seriously, why the hell wasn't there heating in this room? But I was still irritated enough to speak up. Yeah, you've never had to make the choice, I said to Lady Granville. Be glad of it. We sealed the talisman away where it can't hurt anyone else. Ivy Lane, said Lady Granville. I'd check how you speak. I'm told you used their magic too. Great. On cue, all eyes landed on me, expressions ranging from wariness to disgust, like I'd transformed into a hellhound. Drake started to speak, then stopped. I shot him a warning look. Of the select group of mages I'd told about my fairy magic, I regretted telling him the most. Primarily because Drake was incapable of keeping his mouth shut. On the one hand, it was highly amusing when he'd told me half the Mage Council members' closely guarded secrets while inebriated on New Year's Eve, but not when I was on the receiving end. If you're suggesting I'm working against the Council, you're mistaken, I said. I only use magic in defense of my life. I don't want power. That's why I gave up the talisman. An uncomfortable silence followed. She's given her reasons, said Vance. If you want to make a decision about the talisman, consult both Ivy and myself first. Once you give up something to the mage stores, it becomes our property, said Lady Granville. It's a powerful fairy sword nobody but me can handle. I wouldn't try moving it without asking me, I said warningly. A chill swept through the room. Vance stood, glaring at Lady Granville. She's right, and we won't speak of this again. If anyone else attacks the stores, tell me before making decisions. Most of the Mage Council shrank away. Irritation prickled my spine. I hadn't been allowed to bring my sword to the meeting, and my magic didn't work as an intimidation tactic on humans who couldn't see it. This meeting is over, said Vance. I hurried out after him, Lady Granville's stare boring holes into my back. That went well, I muttered when we reached the corridor's end and climbed the wide, thickly carpeted stairs leading down to the conservatory. She won't make the decision without consulting me, said Vance. Tell me first. I walked alongside him, past the open door to the armory. Drake had drawn smiley faces on all the training dummies. I was dead serious. If one of the other mages tries activating that sword, it might blow their hands off. Not to mention it'd attract the attention of every fairy on both sides of the grave. I won't let it happen, said Vance. As to the ghosts, I doubt Lady Granville will get involved further. Because she thinks it's none of our business. Which it wouldn't be, if the ghost hadn't targeted me specifically. Great. I'd been sensible about not going behind the Mage Council's backs over the last few weeks. Not that they liked me even when I towed the line anyway. I was stuck. Were you planning to tell her? I asked. Which part? We rounded the corner into the part of the corridor which led to the conservatory. You know, my magic, the huge target stuck on my head. The ghost who'd promised to kill me and return to life. No. Vance's tone softened. I'll only tell the council what you give me permission to. What's that? Drake came up behind us. Nothing, I said. A likely story. You're the only one who can handle that sword. Please don't tell whichever random woman you hook up with tonight, I said. That's mean. Drake put on a wounded look. Yeah, it was a little, I relented. But it's true. I can't believe you told what's-her-name that I was a fairy on Christmas Eve. I did? Oh, I get your point. I'm not a freaking fairy, I hissed under my breath. Seriously, that's the sort of rumor that'll bring the mob after me. All right. Drake scooted away from me and further away from the dangerous look on Vance's face. I won't tell anyone about your magic. I can keep a secret, believe it or not. Vance made a skeptical noise. Anyway, I didn't know Isabel had spells that make intruders come out in boils. Drake snickered. Please keep coming to meetings. Ha ha, I said. Can you not antagonize Lady Granville? She hates me already. Chill. He made a flame dance over his hands. "Hey, Vance, want to resume our training?" "You mean snowball fight?" I said. The snow-covered back garden beckoned on the other side of the conservatory's glass windows. It had been transformed thanks to some frost mages who got bored on Christmas Eve. "Guests won't start arriving until this afternoon," said Drake. "Tell you what, we'll make it a duel. Loser has to clean up after the party tonight." Turns out, having the magic of a winter she-lord doesn't help you win a snowball fight. I limped back into the manor from the garden later, soaked in snow, which instantly evaporated when I crossed the threshold of the conservatory. Drake's ability as a fire mage repelled snow. He'd even beat out Vance when our 3-person combat round turned into a contest as to who could bury someone in the most snow. Spoiler, not me. I tugged on my hair, which now stood on end like I'd walked over a tripwire spell. How am I supposed to greet the guests like this? "It's a new style," said Drake. I gave him the finger. "You don't need to do anything but stand on the side and look pretty." "I'm not the Mage Lord's pet." "Of course you aren't," said Vance. Apparently noticing me shivering, he conjured a mug of hot chocolate and handed it to me. Okay, there were some serious perks to dating the Mage Lord. I wrapped both hands around the mug and followed him to the conservatory's corner, where a table and chairs were set out. Vance conjured up 2 plates piled with toasted sandwiches. "There, this is now a lunch date." "No, it isn't," said Drake. "The first guests will be here soon, and it's my duty to stop you two from getting distracted." Vance shot him an irritated look. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" "Yes, annoying the crap out of you two." Drake stole one of the sandwiches from my plate. I glared at him, and he smiled, perching on one of the other chairs. I shrugged and grabbed a sandwich. Typically, there were too many people in the manor to get a moment to ourselves. Considering Vance could teleport at will, it was infuriating how often people managed to interrupt us mid-makeout session to drag him off to Mage Lord responsibilities, while acting like I was a statue or a piece of furniture. Still, Vance was more than enough of a bonus. He didn't care if half the Grey Vale wanted my blood. He wanted me, complications included. Vance knew things about me I'd never thought I'd tell anyone, let alone the leader of the Mage Council I'd once hated. I could put up with the council. It had been a nice break from nearly getting killed. Okay, I estimated we'd get a few minutes of calm before something exploded. Sure enough, as I was stirring the dregs of my hot chocolate, Wanda ran into the conservatory. "My grandmother's here." "She is?" I'd never seen Vance snap into super serious mage mode so quickly. He got to his feet and looked back at me. "It's probably best you stay here, unless she wants to talk to you." "She asked for you," Wanda told Vance. "I didn't know she was coming." "Lady Harper does have a habit of showing up unannounced." Vance crossed the conservatory. Wanda followed him, leaving me staring. Okay. Drake stood too. "I'm going to, hide. Lady Harper doesn't like me." He ran from the room. I gaped after him. "What in the name of the she is going on?" "Don't speak that name," snapped a voice. I jumped a foot in the air. "Don't scare me like that, Quentin." The small Faerie had slipped past me, unseen, to clear the plates from the table. He came up to my knees, built like a twig with knobbly, tanned skin and huge, angry eyes. I didn't exactly get along with the taciturn, brownie servant of the Colton family, but he'd been forced, reluctantly, to accept my presence here. "Why not?" I asked. "You mean she, right? Why is it a problem to use that word?" "We don't speak of them here." "Vance uses the word." I shifted uncomfortably. "Other fairies do too." "It's their choice," said Quentin. "But given your position, I'd think before taking their name in vain." He walked off. Huh. Weird. After spending 3 years as the She-Lord Avocus's prisoner, I couldn't help my instinctive response to anything Faerie. Living in the same house as one wasn't unusual. Erwin the Pisky had been in my flat for years. But something about the brownie made me edgy. Maybe because he was a little too shrewd and intelligent, and always seemed to be lurking around when Vance and I were discussing my magic. I never had found out why Vance employed one of the Fae kind here. Vance came back into the conservatory. All traces of calm had vanished from his expression.
"Change of plans," he said. "Lady Harper insists on meeting you."
"Lady Harper? I've met all the mage lords."
"She's retired," explained Vance. "She stepped in after the invasion because 4 of the 5 mage lords were dead and the city badly needed leadership. 2 years later, she retired to the countryside. She's 85 and hates politics, so she has good reason."
"Fair enough," I said. "What's special about her?"
"She trained me."
"Whoa, really? She taught you to be a scary badass?"
"She also taught me how to play the piano."
This I hadn't heard. "You're not having me on, are you?"
"Of course not. She's Wanda's grandmother."
I blinked. Wait, the scary lady? I'd heard mention of the mythical retired master mage a few times, but hadn't connected the two.
"Yes, the scary lady. She wants to talk to you alone."
"Okay." We crossed the conservatory to the main corridor, a wide space carpeted in burgundy. Several oak wood doors led into the various offices. Vance stopped beside the door to his main office and nodded to me. Damn, he was rattled. Scary lady couldn't be that scary, right? I pushed open the door. Vance's office was one of the smaller rooms downstairs, mostly used for meeting clients. A woman sat in a high-backed chair near the cherrywood desk. Her grey hair was cut to chin length, her glassy blue eyes deep set above her wrinkled cheeks. But intelligence shone in her gaze, and she looked me up and down in such a way that it felt like she was stripping layers of skin from me. My spine stiffened automatically, and my instinctive reaction was to check my weapon, which, of course, I didn't have. I said. "Hi, I'm Ivy."
"You're not a talker."
Her voice was rough but strong.
"Good. It'll make this easier. I want you to stay away from Vance Colton."
"What?"
"You aren't stupid, are you?"
"What's your problem with me?"
"Nothing in particular. I'm old and you're annoying."
I gaped at her, not entirely sure if she was being serious. Thanks. I'm not going anywhere. I work for the mages."
"You're not one."
"Vance employed me. Take it up with him."
"He's short-sighted when it comes to you."
She leaned forward in her seat.
"I can't see why. You're nothing special. Plain girl, no magic."
"I have magic." She was asking for it. Blue light coated my hands, but she didn't have the sight. I had an inkling my magic wouldn't scare her anyway.
"If that's the case."
Her wrinkled hands rose up, facing me with palms out.
"Defend yourself."
The air tightened, no longer flowing to my lungs. I gasped for breath, depleted of oxygen. Blue light filtered over my vision as my magic reacted, but it didn't grow any easier to breathe. Whatever magic she used couldn't be countered by fairy magic. Holy shit, she was powerful. My body moved by itself, backing against the bookshelf behind me. My feet were lifted from the ground. 1 inch, 2. "Stop it," I tried to say, but my voice had fled along with all the air in the room. My vision swam. Magic gathered around me, thick, angry, but remained as trapped as I was. I fed my fear and panic into it instead. Come on, she's not killing you. Vance would never have let me talk to her alone if that was her intention. This was a test, and I was losing. Okay, she's not killing me. I ignored the burning sensation in my lungs and concentrated on letting my emotions feed the magic in my hands. I hadn't used it to its full extent since my duel to the death with the Lady of the Tree, right on the ley line. Here, it wasn't as strong without my talisman, but I wouldn't let her humiliate me. The light grew brighter, forming a shield in front of me. But the choking sensation remained, so the shield wasn't strong enough to repel her.
"Defend yourself," she repeated. "You're not worthy to stand alongside the Mage Council."
Screw you. Fine, I'd give her everything I had. I splayed my hands, directing the shield into a forward assault. Magic hummed through me, strong even without my sword nearby. We were in sync, though we weren't in the same room. Blue energy shot from my palms, and the air rushed out of my lungs in a gasp. Magic was an extension of me, like any other weapon. My attack, however, dissolved into smoke, and a vice gripped my chest again. What the hell? She'd blocked me. Whatever she was doing to choke the air inside me, I'd pass out at some point. Surely. Unless my magic was stopping it, like when it had prevented me dying of life-threatening injuries before. I still wasn't sure of the limits of my healing power in this realm. Neither did I particularly want to find out the hard way. Instead, I launched into another attack. And another. Too angry to aim, I threw a wave of magic at her, but she blocked every single time. Jesus! What the hell power does she have? She trained Vance, but she wasn't a displacer. She definitely had some kind of control element. She'd locked down my whole body while deflecting my attacks at the same time. Even Vance had more limits. Hitting her didn't work. I'd need to get within range, behind whatever shielding she used. But my head swam, and lightheadedness washed over me. I'd pass out before this was up. Even my magic's panic response had no effect. Wait. She'd easily broken my shield. But what if I attacked her magic rather than her? I must be able to see it. Mage magic wasn't glamoured, unlike fairy magic. The blue glow around me masked my vision. I imagined it flowing over my skin, close enough to touch, close enough to push away whatever magic she used to paralyze me. Crack. The sound was more a sensation than an actual noise. Magic left me in a dizzying rush, tingling like live wires underneath my skin. My lungs expanded, taking in air. I wobbled to the side, drained of energy, but I'd broken her hold over me.
Pathetic.
Sweat ran down my forehead and back, like I'd run for miles. I swallowed a couple of times. My throat felt like sandpaper. What the hell did you do to me? I asked hoarsely.
I intended to see what you were made of.
She gave me that disdainful look again.
I saw.
The shock wore off a little, but my energy was spent. Screw you. Aloud, I said, "Good for you."
Lady Granville says you're insubordinate.
She's right. I clenched my fingers to get the circulation back and breathed in and out, trying not to show her how much she'd freaked the hell out of me. Are you this nice to every new mage?
You aren't a mage, said Lady Harper. The Mage Council is by definition impartial to outside affairs. From what I hear, you've nearly started 2 wars with the fairies, and caused untold damage when you decided to take on an ancient force. Bringing you into meetings is both dangerous and irresponsible. What do you have to gain from prying into our affairs?
I'm not prying into anything, and Vance knows I'm a walking trouble magnet. He told her about the god?
You don't strike me as the type who needs a bodyguard, she said. Nor are you a simple airhead or a foolish little girl looking for the Mage Lord's approval.
Wow. I waited for the backhanded edge of that compliment to hit. Sure enough.
However, I fail to see why he'd pick you as a match. Even his own council is out looking for a weak link to exploit, a way to undercut him. You're the weak link, Ivy. You have no respect for our rules. I folded my arms. I'm with Vance because I want to be with him, not the council. They can stuff it. Do you want me to inform Lady Granville of that? Go right ahead. Nobody got to call me anyone's weak link, including my own. He won't choose you, Ivy. It's only fair that you accept that as soon as possible. The council comes first. He's nearly given his life for the mages, too many times to count. Has he ever done the same for you? Yes. I spoke clearly, looking her dead in the eyes. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stand my ground and tell her exactly what I thought of her lies. But the glint in her luminous eyes told me she could do worse than choke the air from me. I gave her my best killer mercenary glare. Pleasure to meet you. I won't be staying away from Vance. I turned heel and left, shaking off the tingle of unfamiliar magic against my skin. Chapter 5. Once outside, I sagged against the wall. My whole body felt drained, and I hardly believed I'd been overpowered like that. Well, she had once been a mage lord, and had a hell of a lot more experience than I did. With my sword, I ought to have been able to beat her. It wasn't just my pride she'd knocked. She'd kicked me while I was down. Who the hell was she to suggest I didn't belong here? Over the last few months, I'd made progress towards knitting myself back together after the fairies had taken everything away from me. Now Lady Harper's attack had torn the stitches, leaving my wounds wide open. Ivy? Vance approached me, concern in his expression. I did my best to stand upright and succeeded this time, taking quick breaths to loosen the tight feeling in my chest. I'm good. I'd bet she could hear me. I want to be like her when I'm older. She might be a bitch, but she was also a badass. Who wouldn't want that power? She does leave quite the impression. Yeah, tell me about it. I fell into step with him, walking away from the office. She wanted me to stay away from you. I couldn't figure out why. I glanced at him, trying to catch his expression. His mouth pulled into a frown I hadn't seen for a while. We reached the hall, where the oak doors had been opened wide. Inside, Quentin and several mages were setting up tables around the hall's edges for the gala. It's a test. She may have thought you were after my inheritance, or planning to murder me, possibly both. I gaped at him. Seriously? What the hell did you tell her about me? I didn't, until today, said Vance. She hasn't come here for months. You're actually scared of her, aren't you? What did you think she'd do? She's a breaker, Ivy, said Vance. She can cut into your mind and extract any memory she wants to. My mouth fell open. What? That's a thing? A rare ability, he said. Hers is one of the strongest there is, which is why she was chosen to train me. No freaking kidding. Jesus. I hoped she hadn't broken into my head. I'd know if she had, right? It's not like body control, like Lord Carlisle. Similar, but not quite. Mind control? Not direct mind reading, Vance clarified. That's not possible. It's a little difficult to explain, and Lady Harper won't, but her ability lets her tune into below-surface impulses and send subtle suggestions. Like telling my body not to move. She did that. Yeah. I didn't much feel like discussing my humiliation. I let my gaze drift over the hall instead. The polished floor reflected warm light from the chandelier dominating the high ceiling, and silver tinsel encircled a towering Christmas tree in the corner. She can sense when someone's lying, too, Vance said. It's a varied ability, and not one many other mages have.
Good, I said. So Lord Carlisle can make someone explode, and Lady Harper can make someone hop off a cliff. At least Lady Granville, for all her bluster, had an easy-to-understand ability, earth magic, though any mage could be deadly when pushed. Vance's frown remained in place.
In theory, but nobody gets onto the Mage Council by abusing their power. The first lesson all new mages learn is when it's appropriate to use their ability or not.
Guess I'm used to mercenaries, I said. Give any one of them a mage ability, and they'd burn the city down.
Precisely why we bring any new mage in for training as soon as possible, said Vance. The majority of us are born into it, so we learn early on the price and limits of our powers.
I did wonder who trained you. So she thinks I want this. I waved my hands vaguely at the hall. She actually thinks I want to steal your inheritance? I'd have laughed at the absurdity of the suggestion if I hadn't still been so shaken up. I'd never wanted to be part of the Mages' Society, and it grated on my nerves that Lady Granville had even suggested Isabel and I wanted to accept charity from them. No. I'd be equally as happy with Vance if we lived in a run-down apartment in the mercenary district.
I don't know what she's thinking, said Vance. But I'm a mage lord. My first instinct always has to be to assume somebody wants a favor from me, or to stab me in the back. You're the first woman I've dated since I became head mage.
What? Really?
Most mage lords have let someone slip through their defenses. I didn't intend to be one of them.
Probably not, now I thought about it. Drake had told me he and Vance had spent their first few weeks as leaders of the Mage Council avoiding assassination attempts. Apparently, the attempts had stopped after Vance did something fucking scary. Drake refused to tell me what, exactly, he'd done. I hazarded a guess that it accounted for the rumors I'd heard, what felt like forever ago, that the Mage Lord kept a row of troll heads in his office. So what made you change your mind? I asked, genuinely curious.
You insulted me on more than one occasion, threatened my guards, dripped blood all over the floor, and brazenly refused to cooperate. There was little chance you were the slightest bit interested in my position or reputation.
You aren't wrong there.
See what I mean?
He smiled.
It's refreshing not to have to wonder if you'll stab me in the back.
Is that why you picked me, then? I'm not a mage, so there's no chance of me butting into your political games?
You're also quite attractive.
I poked him in the chest. Seriously, I'm feeling a little oversensitive here. He smirked.
Really? Do you want me to list your positive attributes, or does this work instead?
He pulled me against him, and his mouth closed over mine, which did a pretty effective job of making the after-effects of Lady Harper's attack go away. Yeah, that works, I said breathlessly, this time in a good way. Drake seemed scared of her.
It's complicated,
he said.
She's the most revered and feared mage around, even though she's retired. But she won't be at the gala. She hates parties.
We've got that much in common. The doorbell rang. I smothered a sigh. Guess I should get ready for the ball. While I headed upstairs, Vance went to start showing the guests in. As for me, I faced a new challenge. Making myself presentable. I glared at my reflection in Vance's ceiling-high three-way mirror, adjusting my dress straps to cover the red imprint of the mage mark on my shoulder, a connection to Vance if we were ever separated, like we'd been in Faerie. The mirrors reflected Vance's bedroom back at me, from the elaborately decorated four-poster bed to the velvet curtains covering the glass doors to the balcony. I'd never particularly cared how I looked. My experience with the fairies had taught me being inconspicuous was best. But finding an outfit that complemented my scars was a hair-tearing exercise. I wore a dress about once a month, when I didn't expect to need to run or fight. As for heels, forget it. With my hair properly combed and free of the usual gunk, I cleaned up okay. But showing my face in front of the mages, exposed without any weapons, was scarier than going up against a newly awoken shifter god. Just because I'd had an improvement in fortunes lately, it didn't mean I'd magically jumped to their class level. Polite social niceties went over my head. Petty arguments had me wanting to pull out my sword. Somehow I'd lasted 3 months of reporting into the council without accidentally letting slip what I really thought of them. The curtains fluttered in the breeze, and Vance appeared behind me. His reflection in profile looked as handsome as ever. Clean-shaven jawline, hair combed to the side, tailored suit fitted to show off his athletic build. My heart skipped a little. "Thought you were showing the guests in," I said.
I was.
His grey eyes gleamed.
"You look stunning."
He released my hair from the pins holding it up.
"I like your hair down. I don't see you wear it like this often."
"Because it'd get in the way in a fight. Same reason I don't wear these." I flicked the bright gold earrings dangling from each lobe. He ran a finger up my ear, making warmth pool inside me.
"Relax. I think you're stunning in leather and denim, too."
"And covered in blood?"
"Of course. You're a difficult woman to compliment."
"I just have a highly reactive bullshit detector." His hands moved to my waist, leaving a trail of fire through the thin fabric of my dress.
"I think I've proved my opinion of you. As to the others, don't worry about what they think. They're slow to accept change."
Easy for him to say. He'd been born into this world. I'd done my best to assimilate, and succeeded somewhat. But Lady Granville and most of the council did their best to make me feel like an outsider. They'd all but laughed when I'd suggested lowering their fees so more people could hire them. Poverty wasn't as glaringly bad as it had been in the first 10 years after the invasion, but there were still far too many people who couldn't afford to hire a mage, even in an emergency. I'd learned the hard way, however, that there wasn't a lot the mages could do about that. "Yeah, okay." I hitched on a smile. "Let's go see what's going on downstairs." At least 100 mages had gathered in the Great Hall, which had been fully transformed into party mode. Tinsel wound around the posts supporting the high ceiling, and glittering lights shone all over the huge Christmas tree, the decorations changing colors every minute from blue to green to red. Fake snowflakes scattered amongst the crowd like confetti. Probably Wanda's doing. I reached out a hand and caught one, ignoring the crowd's stares. The snowflake fizzled out on contact with my fingertip. Being under so many eyes made my spine prickle. Unconcerned, Vance strode casually towards Drake and a group of other mages, and I followed. Waiters walked amongst the crowd, handing out champagne and snacks. I wobbled on my heels too much already to trust myself with alcohol. "Chill," I told myself, rearranging my shoulder bag so I wouldn't feel the weight of the dagger hidden inside it, and wishing I'd worn flat shoes rather than strappy sandals. Even here, I was a target. The mage lords were in charge of maintaining order amongst the supernatural communities, but they knew how to throw a damn good party, too. At first, I'd been consumed with dread at every event, convinced I'd get thrown out as an interloper. Now, though, I'd realized half the guests were on my level of the social ladder, having charmed or talked their way in, or been invited in exchange for some favor or other. A fair few witches, and even the odd half-fairy, wandered amongst the crowd, though no necromancers or shifters. Everyone was overwhelmingly polite, but their smiles appeared fake as fairy glamour, their polite manners like a well-crafted illusion. Still, I played the same game, false smile and all. I tallied up no fewer than 12 thinly veiled insults towards me. Nobody dared insult Vance. He didn't even need to use his mage abilities to scare people. While Vance went to show more guests in, I joined Wanda and a group of younger mages at a table near the back. "You met Lady Harper?" asked a freckled young male mage with enough acne to tell me he was still in his teens, despite being taller than me. "Yeah," I said. Scary woman. She's terrifying, isn't she? Asked Wanda. I don't tell people we're related, usually, unless they ask. Wanda was pretty even-tempered for a mage, which made her connection with Lady Harper even more bizarre. The freckled mage laughed.
Did she do her laser stare on you?
He asked me. Yeah. I didn't much feel like going into detail on our encounter, at least not tonight. Why does Drake hate her? I asked, to deflect attention off me, and picked up a strawberry from the snack table. Only the mage lords could get strawberries out of season. Luxuries like this reminded me of another world, the one before the invasion. You need to ask, said Wanda. He's shown the mages up so many times, my grandmother regrets ever electing him in. So why do it in the first place? Wanda shrugged. Drake is Vance's best friend. The second in command needs to be someone the head mage trusts. There was a lot of turbulence before Vance stepped in a year ago. Huh. Interesting. Not for the first time, Vance's words when I'd asked him how he'd become head mage came back to me. I killed the last guy. He'd never told me who, exactly, or why. Turbulence? I asked casually. Does it have to do with how Vance became head mage? I can't really talk about it. Wanda stood quickly. Speaking of my grandmother, I need to check the soundproofing spells on her room. She'll scream the place down if the party wakes her up. Hey, you don't have to go, I said. Never mind, forget I asked. I started to climb out of my seat, and stopped when a familiar figure glided past. Ralph, Vance's quarter fairy guard. He seemed to be doing his best to avoid attention, slipping through the crowd and lingering behind different groups of people. Eavesdropping? Ralph had been on guard outside the manor less often since he'd fallen under the influence of the drug Calder had used on the half-fairies, but still stuck around to take jabs at me at every opportunity. I didn't trust the guy at all. I spotted Vance making his way through the crowd and walked over to him. He slid an arm around my waist and steered me onto the dance floor. I still didn't like dancing, but I didn't object to Vance pulling me into his orbit, close enough to feel his warmth against my skin and inhale his cool, masculine scent.
Enjoying the party?
Sure, I lied.
What is it?
I scanned the crowd for the other half-fairies, recognizable by their oddly unreal beauty and the shimmer of magic around them. Ralph's skulking around. Thought it was weird.
Oh, I asked him to, said Vance. He's listening in on the other guests in case anyone's planning any subterfuge. Half the mages here are hoping to get onto the council at the elections in a few weeks. It's been a while since so many have been in the same room.
Does Lady Harper think any of them are planning to murder you? My hand twitched towards my bag, which I'd left half-zipped at an angle to make it easy to grab my dagger. This was why I didn't do parties. Nobody looked like they might be plotting against us. But then, that was the point, wasn't it?
Not tonight, said Vance. The wards keep out anyone intending immediate harm.
Not tonight. I found myself inching closer to him, scanning the crowd again. With my fairy magic, I was fairly sure I could deflect any kind of attack from here. His hand rested at the base of my spine.
Don't worry. I have the best security in the city.
Me? That got me a grin.
Trust me, we're safer here than anywhere else. Sorry I alarmed you.
I'd rather know if any backstabbing asshats are waiting in the crowd.
They wouldn't dare touch either of us.
His tone didn't change much, but I detected the don't fuck with me vibe that indicated he wouldn't be above blasting the roof off if someone attacked one of us. Good. I relaxed into step with him.
Believe me,
he said, his voice dropping low, seductive.
If I wasn't the host, I'd move us out of this room in a second. But unfortunately, Drake needs to have several eyes on him at all times.
I don't doubt that. But the last 24 hours had been a reminder of just how many potential enemies we had out there, even on the other side of the grave. Nope, don't think about ghosts either. My eyes drifted over the crowd and caught a faint blue light behind the glass-windowed doors. Fairy magic? As the dance finished and I stepped away from Vance, a figure slipped ahead of me. Damn, that half-fairy moved fast. In the time it took me to turn my back, Ralph had gone through the doors. The blue glow wasn't there anymore. Mage Lord! A group of diplomats descended on us. I gave Vance a look that communicated, I want out. Vance gave the slightest nod, and I made my way towards the door. Ralph had turned the corner in the corridor, heading towards the conservatory. Weird. Nobody was in that area of the manor. Everyone was in the hall, as far as I knew. Was he following the light? A scream sounded ahead. My body froze. Then I grabbed the dagger from my shoulder bag and ran after Ralph. Or rather, ran into him. He'd stopped dead in the middle of the conservatory, and I knocked him off his feet. My elbows grazed the tiled floor, feet tangling in my dress as I tried to pin him down. Baring his teeth in a snarl, Ralph leaped at me. I might be wearing heels and weaponless, but I still had my magic. Blue light flared around me, and he slammed into the tiled floor. I held him down, my dagger at his throat. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled. "You attacked me." I tightened my grip as he struggled. "What the hell are you doing out here?" "None of your business." My blade nicked the skin of his neck. His blue eyes widened. "You're crazy!" "What did you expect me to do? You jumped me." "You crept up behind me and freaked the hell out of me. Let go." I released my hold marginally. "What were you even doing in here?" "Nothing. What are you accusing me of?" "Sneaking around and acting suspicious," I said. "Call me paranoid, but too many fairies have tried to kill me. 2 in the last day alone, actually." "I'm not a fairy, you freak show." "So what's with the skulking around?" His alabaster pale face gleamed in the bright lights. Actually, he looked scared. And not of me. "Thought I saw someone outside?" "A fairy." Tension gripped my spine. Now we'd left the warmth of the hall behind, the chill from outside seeped through the glass-fronted windows and brought me out in goosebumps. "Never mind." His voice rose on the last word. "I bet it was you I saw. Your reflection." I stilled, almost forgetting to keep my hold on him. "You're aware I have winter magic, aren't you?" "Yeah, like I said. The light was you." "You saw it too?" Damn. I hadn't imagined it. The light had been outside the hall. It couldn't have come from me. "I saw blue light in the hallway. That's why I was following you." "What?" His voice was too high to be fake. He was genuinely scared. I loosened my hold further, removing my dagger from his neck. "What I said. Did you see where the light came from?" It disappeared outside." "So you saw winter magic outside?" I let go, enough to squint out the window while still keeping one eye on him. The only light came from the reflection of the moonlight on the snowy lawn, glittering like spider silk. "I don't see anything." "Yeah, it was there. Before you jumped me." "You saw something else, didn't you? Magic wouldn't scare you." "Maybe I don't know what I saw." "Tell me, or I'll report you to Vance." "I didn't do anything." His voice hitched up an octave. "I saw that light, and I went after it, and I saw someone outside. They disappeared." "What's going on?" Vance's voice echoed through the empty conservatory. I properly let go of Ralph and got to my feet. "Just a friendly chat." "She attacked me," said Ralph. "We attacked each other," I explained in response to Vance's raised eyebrow. "He jumped at me first because I followed him in here. He sneaked out of the hall and was acting suspiciously.
Since when is walking in the corridor suspicious?
Ralph rubbed his neck, sliding to his feet in a fluid motion only someone with fairy blood could achieve. When everyone else is in the hall? I dusted my dress off and stashed my dagger back in my shoulder bag. He says he saw something weird outside. Won't tell me what it was. Vance leveled his gaze onto Ralph.
Is that true? I said I don't know what I saw, said Ralph. It's dark out there. It looked like a person, but it might have been her reflection. Probably was. She jumped me before I could take a proper look. Are you certain? Asked Vance. Positive. Then go.
Brushing dust from his black suit, Ralph slipped out of the conservatory, leaving us alone. Don't, I said.
I wasn't going to blame you.
Vance's eyes were on the snow-covered lawn.
I know you wouldn't pick a fight for no reason. Did you see anything outside?
Didn't have chance to look. But I thought I saw something in the corridor. Fairy magic. He turned to me.
Fairy magic? Inside the manor?
Yeah. I shifted, my feet protesting at the movement. Damn those heels. It was in the corridor. Magic can't get past the boundaries, can it?
The wards specifically keep out anything intending harm, said Vance. I will order a search of the manor, however.
Don't make a big deal of it, I said quickly. I might have been mistaken, but Ralph was acting weird.
Like I said, he's listening out for useful information because I trust him, said Vance. I know you don't like him, but he isn't working against the mages. He dislikes the fairies too, and his human family disowned him.
Wait, they did? Sure, Vance wasn't the self-centered prick I'd once believed him to be, but why would the fact that Ralph had been disowned make him unequivocally trust him as a spy?
Yes, said Vance. The mage lords took me in after the invasion in the same way.
What? I blinked, startled. But you own this house, right? Didn't you inherit it?
Technically, yes. There were certain amongst the mage lords at the time who believed handing the mage's headquarters over to a child was a foolish move on my parents' part. They thought I should live with my uncle.
Oh. Oh. His uncle hated the shifters and the mages. That would have gone down well. You were what, 10 years old? They really tried to take the house away from you?
I never wanted it, said Vance quietly. Not then. But my uncle closed the door in my face. Lady Harper offered to mentor me, and the other mage lords quickly backed down.
So, I wasn't the only one who'd been screwed over by former mage lords. I never would have guessed it had happened to Vance of all people. Jesus. Sorry.
It's old history. Besides, those mage lords didn't last long. This house is designated as a safe zone, so nothing can have passed our wards.
He moved towards the window. The snow-covered lawns gleamed under the moonlight, but no blue glow remained. I'd say I imagined it, but Ralph had seen the light too. Vance trusted about as easily as I did. If he thought Ralph was innocent, I'd believe him. I saw something. Might have been another fairy's magic. But how did it get inside? I'd never seen anything get through Vance's security before. The whole manor was covered in glyphs that strengthened the witch wards built into the very bricks, and iron foundations surrounded the extensive grounds. I wouldn't have thought even a ghost could surpass them, though spirits weren't entirely bound by the same rules.
I pulled down the iron barrier over the front entrance, Vance said. But the gardens under so many anti-Fae wards, even Quentin can't leave the conservatory. There are guards stationed outside as well. I'll ask them to keep an eye out.
Still. I scanned the grounds again. Nothing. My sight would reveal anything concealed by glamour, but maybe not a ghost. Goosebumps prickled my arms and legs, the cold air seeping into the conservatory and chilling my bare skin.
"The guests will notice our absence," said Vance. "I'll order some of my most trusted mages to run the search. Our wards can detect anything."
"I'd search," I said, "but not in these damned heels. I was pretty sure I had blisters after being on my feet for so long. There are guests here with fairy magic. Maybe it was one of them I saw."
"Maybe."
Vance took one last look outside and moved closer to me, his warmth blocking out the chill.
"You're safe here."
"Even with backstabbing mages in the hall?"
"Even then."
I looked out the window again. A normal night, crowned with stars. No signs of foul play. I turned and walked back to the party with Vance. Chapter 6. "Ivy Lane!" Isabel's voice yelled down the phone. "We've got a client!" "What?" I yawned, half asleep. It had been a late night after the party, even though Vance had taken pity on me and made Drake retract the bet we'd made on yesterday's snowball fight so I didn't have to clean up. The guests took forever to leave, and my face still hurt from wearing a false smile for so many hours, not to mention the blisters on my feet. "A client," Isabel said. "Another ghost case." I groaned and rubbed my eyes. "What time is it?" 9 o'clock. "I've been holding the fort in the office. I thought you'd have a late night." "You weren't wrong." I looked over at Vance. He was awake before me, as usual, going through a stack of papers at the desk. "They'll be back in an hour, if you can drag yourself away from Vance." "I'll be there." I clicked off the phone and went searching for my clothes. Before I'd moved a meter, they appeared on the bed, along with... Is this a healing spell?
"You were limping last night,"
said Vance. I smiled. "You're too observant for your own good."
"You tortured yourself with those heels to keep my guests happy."
"Most of them acted like I was part of the wall." I activated the spell, sighing when the sting of my blisters faded. Once I was showered and dressed, I joined Vance. The oak wood desk dominated the left side of the room, leaving enough room for Vance's stack of paperwork and a plate of pancakes, plus more fresh strawberries and coffee. I could definitely get used to living the high life with the Mage Lord.
"Another client?"
he asked me. "Yeah." I took a bite of pancake. "Apparently there's another ghost. I should have asked why they didn't hire the necromancers instead. What are those papers for?"
"Council meetings, the usual."
"Wait, do they know about last night? What I thought I saw?"
"No. I told the guards I wanted to run a general security check. There was no reason to draw attention."
"Good."
"Last night, did anyone else see what Ralph did? I'm planning to question him about the incident to see if he can remember any more details."
"No," I said. "We were alone. I didn't see anyone else who saw the magic, if that's what it was. I should have told you before I went looking. Or someone who doesn't have the sight."
"Don't worry about it. Lady Granville's having a paranoid streak about our security, so I thought it'd be best to anticipate any possible problems."
"Like ghosts?" He looked at me.
"You think he saw a ghost?"
"Can ghosts bypass wards?"
"It depends on the ward, I imagine."
His forehead creased.
"Only necromantic circles can properly contain a spirit. But ghosts are usually tied to one place."
"Like where they died," I said. "Is Lady Granville scared of ghosts?"
"She distrusts things which cannot easily be explained," said Vance. "She doesn't know about last night, but her skepticism might prove tricky if the mages are drawn into more investigations around spirits. I do wish Lord Evander would get his act together."
"Tell me about it." I finished eating my pancake. "Our client's probably after an exorcism too. Just what we need."
"Be careful," he said.
"Will do." I regretted complaining about the lack of clients lately. Maybe those ghosts had heard me. Drop me in the corridor. I don't want to freak out our clients. He took my arm.
Should I call you in a few hours?
I'll let you know what I'm doing. Wait, can you check in with the chief? I want to know if the Banshee was right. The chief wasn't a big fan of technology and didn't have a mobile phone or any way of keeping in contact, so I'd either have to send an emissary from the mages or go there in person. I didn't want to hope anyone had died at the jail last night, but if the alternative was another attempt on my life...
Of course I will.
We landed in the upstairs corridor of my flat. I kissed Vance goodbye and strode into the office. A man and woman stood in front of the desk. Both were around my age, lean and tough-looking, wearing daggers strapped to their legs and arms, tattered jeans and thick leather jackets. Mercenaries.
You're Ivy Lane.
The guy had that unshaven, in need of a haircut look some people found attractive. Yeah. I drew myself up to my full height. Since I was 5'4", 5'6" with heels, I needed my sword to make an impression. I'm Isabel's partner. You wanted our help. If you can help, said the woman in a doubtful tone. There's something inside our apartment. All the signs suggest it's a spirit, Isabel added. Or something that moves really fast. And you couldn't catch it?
No.
The guy's hand twitched towards one of his weapons.
Damned thing moved too quickly. It's throwing the furniture around.
So you came to us and not the necromancers? Why? Because the necros aren't taking on clients, said the woman. I'm told you performed an exorcism the other day. Yeah, I did. I didn't ask why they hadn't hired the mages. Their threadbare clothes and second-hand daggers spoke for themselves. I'd been in their position not so long ago. Okay, did you want us to bring a necromancer, or just do an evaluation? We can't go up against a spirit without the proper equipment. Actually, we have it, said Isabel. The Coven took out a loan from Lord Evander on the condition that we report to him afterwards. Apparently his people are dealing with a major case of undead today. Or a major case of I don't give a shit. I'd ask why in hell Lord Evander had trusted her with his equipment when he hated me so much, but not in front of our clients.
Was that a yes?
Asked the guy. I turned to him. I'll get my sword first, then we'll go. See what this spirit is all about. You can't kill it with a sword, said the woman. I tried. I resisted the impulse to roll my eyes. Mercenaries' default response to anything hostile was to stab it, even if it was invisible. Not that I was one to talk. It had been a while since I took the bus. More people avoided me than usual when Isabel and I paid for our tickets and sat down, probably due to my sword. It flared blue whenever a half-fairy got on the bus. I pushed it into the sheath, catching sight of my reflection in the glass. Even without my sword, the faint blue glow of magic wreathing my body marked me as separate. Something had changed since I'd acquired the new sword, the talisman which had once belonged to Avacus. Something that marked me as no normal human. What the hell are the necromancers doing? I asked Isabel in an undertone. Why'd Lord Evander hand his equipment over to you? The undead, said Isabel. Apparently they chased zombies all through last night. Last night? When a spirit appeared? If I believed Ralph. I saw Lord Evander yesterday, I told her. He was a complete shit to me. Why trust us with the equipment? There are 100 other people he might have asked. The mage lords, any other witch. Our coven's the biggest, said Isabel. He lent the equipment to the coven, not to me. I didn't mention you'd be involved. Oh. Yeah, she grimaced. He's an idiot, I know. You're probably better at banishing the dead than half his necromancers. undead and hellhounds. My only experience with banishing ghosts was the other night, and it didn't end so well. Hope today goes better, Isabel said. What did Lord Evander say? That his people aren't responsible for the ghosts. Oh, and then the chief gave us trouble. I ran through everything that had happened before I'd gone to the Major's place, including the encounter with the Banshee. Damn, Ivy, said Isabel. There I was thinking you just went for a quick rendezvous with Lord Evander before the gala. And the chief, I said. I've thought about sneaking into the prison again, but it's not worth the risk. Except the Banshee said someone would die. Someone who was already in the jail. I didn't mention the other possibility, that she meant Vance or me. Voicing my fears would give them power over me. I wasn't about to fall victim to paranoia again. Did you find anything out about that half-hobgoblin? She asked. Only that he claimed to be under the drug's influence when Calder tried to blow up the town. Like half the jail. He wasn't even the one who broke out. He was killed in the fighting. That's it? No more details? That was when the Banshee attacked us. Killed the conversation. Oh. Yeah, I know. I need to check back in with the chief at some point today. And Vance. And Lord Evander. I think the Mage Lord's influence is rubbing off on you, said Isabel. You know you don't have a teleporting ability, right? You physically can't be in 3 places at once. Ha ha. I yawned, wishing I'd grabbed more coffee to go. Feels like if I look one way, someone's being attacked behind my back. They're not all your responsibility, said Isabel. Even the mages. I know. But the Banshee said someone would die, and I'd like to make sure it isn't Vance or me. I forced my head into the moment. Hypothetical death and wayward necromancers weren't as important as getting rid of this spirit. The rest could wait. The bus rattled over a pothole as we left the sturdier roads of our suburb behind, and moved on to the once well-maintained main road. Isabel gripped the seat in front with both hands to avoid falling against me. And what did the Mage Lord say at the meeting, anyway? I never asked. Lady Granville tried to blame me. Drake made jokes. The usual. Oh, and I met Vance's tutor, Lady Harper, and she nearly choked me to death. Wait, you met Lady Harper? I turned my back on the window. You know her? She used to be the advisor to the Coven. Really? She's a mage, right? I think so. She was before my time. She did what to you? Choked me with her mad skills. I grimaced, aware the mercenaries were looking our way curiously. I broke her hold, but I never thought I'd meet anyone scarier than Vance. What did she do with the Coven? I think she's the reason the mages have an unlimited supply of our spells and wards. She didn't strike me as the selfless type. I lowered my voice. Also, she told me to stay away from Vance. I said no way in hell. She told you that? Who is she, his mother? His mentor. And foster mother, I guess, because he lost his parents in the invasion. I looked away at the dilapidated houses we passed as a few spots of rain left trails down the dirty windows. Never mind. I'm not listening to her anyway. She's scary as hell, but she can't touch me. Pride wasn't the problem. I'd never doubted I'd have to fight to retain a standing amongst the mages. It was another blow altogether to realize she didn't believe I was worthy to stand beside Vance, as a partner. Thinking of how Lady Harper had called me a weak link made me all the more determined not to screw up this case. The bus pulled up in one of the mercenary districts. Run-down flats, some still in pieces from the aftershocks of the invasion, grouped either side of us. Plants overgrew the fallen buildings, fed by summer magic, while the others boasted the cheapest rent in the city as a small price for neighboring with monsters. Fey kind, and not the nice sort, lurked in the shadows between the blocks of flats. I'd had many a mercenary mission in this very area, though half the population of this particular district were mercs themselves, living dangerously. A ghost was the least deadly enemy you might encounter. At least it couldn't rip out your insides and leave you to rot in an alley. Even the cleanup crew rarely showed here. The stench of decay pervaded, creeping up through the pothole-strewn road and out of the dark alleys. The mercs were mostly left alone, and only problems big enough to attract public complaint were brought to the attention of the guild, like the time a hydra had risen up out of the canal and dragged people off bridges. Through gaps in the dingy apartment blocks, the water flowed sluggishly. I drew my sword, its glow a clear warning to the dark fae lurking in the shadows. I knew they were there, both from the scratching noises and from the smell of decaying magic underneath the general aroma of rot. The couple led the way into one of the flats, buzzing their way into a dingy corridor that smelled of days-old garbage and cigarette smoke. There were no working lights inside, and the elevator was broken, so we had to make our way up 2 flights of stairs with the aid of my phone torch and a light spell Isabel carried. The corridor was a hazardous game of leap over the crack and hope you didn't fall through the floor. Something clawed stuck its head through a particularly large hole and snapped its teeth at us. The merc girl stabbed it in the eye with a jagged knife, and it retreated, blood spattering the floorboards. I'd been right. They took care of their own here. It must dent their pride to have to call for our help over a disembodied intruder. The inside of their 1-bedroom apartment reminded me of a troll's lair. Trophies hung on the walls, ranging from shriveled heads to curved teeth and unidentifiable claws. Rows of bloody footprints decorated the threadbare carpet, and the only furniture, aside from the sunken old double bed, was a set of shelves displaying monster claws and daggers rather than books. The flickering light illuminated a set of blood-stained swords that might fetch a good price on the market. If they sold the lot, they might have been able to afford a better flat. But I'd figured they were the sort who prioritized kills over common sense. A rattling sounded from behind the shelves. "Just a mouse," said the guy. Isabel gave the wobbly shelf a wary look and moved out of the way. I'd never complain about the lack of heating in our upstairs office again, and I'd bet Isabel had the same thought. Our landlord might be an asshat, but he'd never let our flat get into this stage of neglect. Admittedly, he'd nearly thrown me out on the streets the time I'd come in covered in redcap entrails, but at least being flatmates with Isabel ensured a never-ending supply of cleansing spells. The only spells on the shelves here were healing concoctions, and the cheap and nasty homemade sort. A jagged scar on the girl's neck told me they'd been in situations that called for a super-strength healing spell, but hadn't had one ready. Without Isabel, I'd be the same. Isabel cleared her throat. "Where's the ghost?" "We don't know," said the guy. "It woke us up early this morning by ripping cupboard doors off." He indicated the dark area of the kitchenette, which I gathered was where the smell of mold came from. It threw one at me. The woman indicated the bed, where 2 wooden cupboard doors lay in splintered pieces. I figured it might be one of the Fae kind, but we tore the place up and there's nothing. She shrugged. I called the necros, but this idiot of an assistant said they were busy. He said he knew the witches would help. "Colby," I said. He was with us on the last case." The guy gave me a suspicious look. "So is there a ghost in here or not?" "We aren't necromancers," I said. "All we can do is use a sensor." "On it." Isabel unzipped the rucksack she'd brought. Sure enough, she had Colby's sensor. Pity I'd never asked how to activate the emergency button that turned ghosts into ectoplasm. We might need it now. "Same as last time," I said. "Best place for a trapping circle's probably by the door. There's no other way to escape." "Windows boarded up," said Isabel. "Oh, that was the goblins," said the woman. "Goblins? Just great." "Where'd you last see the ghost?" I asked. "I mean, evidence of the ghost? You don't have the spirit sight, do you?"
The what? Asked the guy blankly.
Spirit sight. It's what necromancers have, I explained. They can see into the spirit world. You can't see ghosts? Asked the woman. No, said Isabel. I told you before that we're borrowing the necromancer's equipment. I can use this sensor, though. She held it out. The red light didn't come on, so the spirit must be hiding.
You're both witches? Asked the guy. You were a merc, though. Ivy Lane, right?
Yes. Are you sure it was a ghost? We aren't getting a reaction. Maybe it vanished, suggested the girl.
Can they do that?
Time for Necromancy 101 again. Not if they're tethered here. When a ghost materializes, it sticks. They tend to attach themselves to a place which was important to them in life, somewhere they lived once. Or the place they died in. Ghosts usually haunted places right after their immediate deaths. The necromancers on the other side of the veil were more efficient than their living counterparts at ensuring nothing stayed behind. Until now. We moved into this apartment last year, she said. Nothing strange appeared in the ads. People don't usually advertise ghosts, I said.
Very funny you are, said the guy.
Well, was anyone killed here? I asked.
No clue.
Great. Typical mercs. Both of them had their weapons out, for all the good that'd do against a spectre who could tear off cupboard doors. That kind of strength was rare, even for a poltergeist. Mostly they knocked things over. I hoped this ghost was human. With pieces of dead Faerie on the shelves as trophies, this was possibly the worst place for an overpowered fairy ghost to wander into. Isabel, I said quietly, is the sensor reacting? No. She waved it around. Not getting a reaction from anywhere in here. The other ghost hid itself. I shivered under my leather jacket, pulling out my sword a little more to show the blue glow. If there really was a half-fairy ghost, I'd rather lure it out than stand here for hours and jump at every tiny noise.
Come out, you fucker!
The guy brandished his dagger. That's not gonna work, idiot. His girlfriend turned to me. Thought you were the experts. If the sensor's not picking up, our only option's to throw salt over everything and force the spirit to move into the trap. It's less effective if we don't know where it is to begin with.
Salt? Said the guy in a skeptical tone. Salt scares off ghosts?
Don't ask me why, I said. Maybe it's because salt burns undead. And ghosts if they materialize. We have a backup weapon if that happens. And I had my sword if it turned out a fairy was here, living or dead. Salt it is, said Isabel. I'll handle the trap. Ivy? Gotcha. I took the salt container from her. We'll seal the room's edges first, so it can't pass through the walls. That is, if it hasn't already.
There's no one living in the next apartment, said the guy. They say the last dude fell through the floor.
Seriously? Thought you said no one died here.
I said no one was murdered here.
People die around here all the time, added the woman. You might have mentioned that, I said. Whatever the cause of death, multiple casualties make a place more likely to turn into a target for spectral activity.
How was I meant to know? Said the guy. I'm not a necromancer. Sure as hell don't know anyone who's been haunted before.
Because ghosts are rare. Finding 2 in 2 days was even rarer. I made my way around the edge of the flat, sealing off the bathroom and the kitchenette first. Now the ghost had to stay in this room, if it hadn't left already. The creaking noises underneath and above did nothing to soothe my frazzled nerves. This old shithole was falling to pieces anyway. I stepped back, and the floor creaked under my feet, then gave way, pulling me into darkness. Chapter 7. Isabel shouted my name. A yell jammed my chest, as my hands scrabbled to get a grip on the collapsing floor. Sharpness dug into both my legs, but the splintering floorboards slowed my descent long enough to grab either side of the hole in the floor. Isabel ran to me, then screamed again as her body was flung aside. The ghost. Swearing, I half pulled myself out, calling on the fairy magic to boost my speed before the spirit kicked me through the hole properly. The salt container had rolled to the side, spilling half its contents onto the blood-stained carpet. The two mercs stood frozen, backed against the bookcase. I grabbed for the salt container, and it rolled out of sight underneath the bed. "Isabel, the trap!" I yelled, scooping a handful of salt from the floor. Isabel had pulled out a second container and threw its contents down in front of the far wall, but there were too many places the spirit could cause damage in here. The shelf wobbled. "Guys?" I grabbed my sword. "Get away from that." "Huh?" said the guy, as the shelf lurched forward. My dagger lifted itself, pointing at the back of the merc's head. Throwing myself across the room, I shot magic through my palms, knocking into the shelves. The heavy wooden structure fell forwards, and the two mercs dodged as the knife threw itself at them. I caught it one-handed, meeting a surprising resistance. Was the spirit still holding the knife? I tugged hard, and the knife came away in my hand. My sword slashed at the spot where the weapon had hovered, but no reaction. The ghost had gone again. "I thought you said you couldn't see the spirit," gasped the woman, staring wild-eyed at the wrecked shelves. "Saw the knife," I said. "How the hell did you move so fast?" the guy demanded. "Thought you were a witch." "Speed-enhancing rune." I fell back on my usual excuse. "Isabel, why isn't that sensor working?" "No clue." She was crouched out the way of the fallen shelves, frantically going through her backpack. "The trapping circle. Think we'll need the emergency button instead." There were too many dangerous instruments in the room to risk the ghost having free run a moment longer. "Not when we don't know where the ghost is." For all the noise, I still couldn't see the spirit. I threw a handful of salt at the shelves' remains instead, hoping that would deter the spirit from throwing knives around again. "Give me the sensor. Maybe I can—" Laughter echoed around the room. I froze, as did Isabel. The tracker gave one long beep. Then the ceiling came down. A faint creaking noise was our only warning. The broken light fell, bringing a shower of plaster and wood. I whipped my sword out, magic flaring through my palms into a shield above our heads. The haze of shimmering blue light kept the ceiling from collapsing. Both mercs, however, continued to scream. "Relax, I'm holding it." I did anything but relax as I held the shield in place. "Get out. Isabel, block the door if you can. I'll take it out." Isabel gave me a frightened look, while the two mercs were fixated on my hands. I held them palm up, a layer of blue energy the only defense between us and the falling heap of plaster and wood. What they saw instead of the magic, I had no idea. An invisible shield, maybe. Sweat ran down my neck from the effort. I'd never maintained a shield for this long before, and didn't want to run into my limit. "I can't hold it forever," I snapped at the mercenaries. "Get out if you want to live." They ran. Isabel, meanwhile, shut the door on them, throwing salt down to block the way outside. "I told you to run with them." "I'm not leaving you alone in here." She'd thrown the salt into a circle around herself, and had the presence of mind to grab her rucksack, too. "I'll get the trap set up." "Okay. I'll take the sensor, then." Still holding the shield, I backed towards the door. Once I was out from under the falling ceiling, it came down in a shower of dust. I coughed, my eyes watering, arms raised to protect myself and Isabel from the onslaught of plaster. Isabel groaned behind me. "I can't see to light candles in here." Shit. I hoped nobody had been in the flat above. A huge chunk of ceiling had come down, even though I'd attempted to slow it with my magic. "Can you pass me the sensor?" It took a few seconds of flailing into the dark to grab onto the instrument. Its red light flashed weakly. I switched it to my left hand and used my right to point my sword into the darkness. The faint blue glow pushed the shadows away and illuminated the smiling face of a ghost. I jerked back, smacking into the wooden door. My sword wobbled. "Did I startle you, Ivy Lane?" asked the ghost. "It's not him." Of course it wasn't Calder. But the male half-fairy had the same look. Icy blue eyes, eerily handsome features, chin-length silver hair, transparent in ghost form. He glided over to us, and I moved in front of Isabel. "Ivy? What's going on?" Oh, hell. The ghost must have used glamour so only I could see it. "Glamour," I said. "Another half-fairy. Don't move from the door." I stepped over the salt barrier, my sword outstretched. If the ghost materialized as solid, I'd be able to chop its limbs off. I'm not scared of it. "That was a mistake," hissed the ghost. His eyes glowed blue, the same color as my sword. Hell, must have winter magic then. "No mistake." I hit the sensors button. The ghost should have exploded into ectoplasm. Instead, it disappeared. Huh? "Ivy, what's going on?" Isabel sounded semi-hysterical. "I can't see anything." "Get the trap," I said out of the corner of my mouth. "We have a situation." "Don't walk into it," she warned. "The ceiling's already come down." And the floor. But I was reasonably confident in my magic to protect myself. Didn't mean I was confident it'd protect Isabel, or anyone else in the building if the ghost decided to knock out the foundations. "How are you so powerful?" I asked the empty shadows. "How'd you avoid the sensor?" "Your pitiful human trappings are nothing." The sensor moved in my hand. I pulled back. Holy crap! The ghost had actually grabbed onto it. No spirit could materialize to that degree, not under normal circumstances. Someone had given this ghost a boost. Fortunately, I was stronger. I wrenched my hand away, stabbing upwards. Its grip on the sensor disappeared. Even ghosts had an instinctive response when you ran them through with a sword. The ghost materialized again, floating a foot off the ground. "Bitch," he said. "Okay, here's how this is going to go," I said. "You're going to get into the trap, and the necromancers will take you for a one-way trip past the veil. No returning." The ghost's fist went through my chest. Even though I knew, rationally, a ghost couldn't harm me, my body flinched back by itself, giving the ghost a chance to thwack me on the head with a piece of wood. Stars winked before my eyes, and I swore explosively. I had a sword that had stopped a dead god, and I'd been bested by a ghost. Luckily, none of the mages were here to witness this. "Quit it!" I snarled. It had vanished again. I stabbed out with my sword instead. The talisman's power came from death. Maybe I could best a spirit after all. Maybe if I went into death, I'd be able to see it. Nope. Not happening here. I shivered. The ghost had driven every vestige of warmth from my body, like I'd taken a round trip into death again. The blue glow from my sword illuminated the way forward. I needed to figure out how to scare it into the trap. "Isabel?" "Yeah?" she asked faintly. "What the hell was that?" "Half-fairy," I said. "How's the trap coming along?" "Not great." A knife threw itself at me. I deflected it with a shield, my veins humming with magic. The light grew brighter in the dark, but still, no ghost. It had decided to go full-on invisible, apparently. Think. Ghosts usually had one good boost of energy and that was it. The pauses between attacks suggested the spirit was conserving its strength. But if I provoked it into a full attack, maybe I'd be in with a chance of tiring it out enough to use the sensor's hidden weapon. Whatever boosted its power surely wasn't here. Ghosts were concentrated spectral energy, and as far as I knew, only necromancers had the means to give a spirit the strength to properly materialize. What that meant, I'd think about later. Well, this is disappointing. I moved forwards into the dark, the ever-growing blue light showing me the way. I expected a better effort, since you took the trouble to drag us out here. Any reason you picked here to terrorize? We both know I'm your real target. Seems a waste of energy to smash this place to pieces.
You don't know anything, Ivy Lane, said the cold male voice. You were supposed to die.
Yeah? No, I said. Who told you that?
You wouldn't know.
The ghost appeared, transparent, gleaming with blue light.
You never asked our names. We were always nothing to you. You'd have sacrificed any of us. He told me that.
Ice flooded my veins. Calder.
He's coming for you, Ivy.
He's dead, I informed him. So are you.
Not for long.
The ghost's hand shot out. I pushed with my sword, and to my surprise, actually shoved the spirit back. I'd thought knocking spirits around only worked when the veil was thinning. Is Calder with you? I asked, my voice all but drowned out by the hum of magic from my sword.
He will be,
snarled the ghost. My magic had agitated the spirit, pushing him back towards the ruined section of ceiling.
The dead won't rest for much longer, except for you.
Care to elaborate? Fear wasn't the only thing freezing my hands to my sword. I hoped it was just the cold air, not winter magic. Because if the ghost had his magic back, it was a whole other dilemma. The floor shook underneath my feet again. I braced my feet, but the shaking forced me to lower my sword to stabilize myself. The ghost lunged over the sword and punched me through the chest again. Ice flooded me, locked my body into place. Even my sword stilled as a chill like death's own touch gripped me by the throat. No. I reached for the pain and fear, both mine and the ghost's. The ghost's anger swept through me, brightening the glow of the magic in my hands. My shield flared to life, and the ghost flew across the room into the wreckage of the collapsed ceiling. The ghost's face showed fear, and it turned around as though trying to run. I jumped over the ruins, borne by my own magic-enhanced speed, and landed behind the ghost. My next hit sent it spinning past the wrecked shelves. The ghost snarled and lunged towards the door. At Isabel. The sensor wasn't working. I had one weapon left. In a final leap, I cleared the few meters between us and thrust upwards, my blade piercing the ghost's chest. Come to me. Fear and panic that wasn't mine shot through me, through the sword, and the ghost shattered like glass. Silence fell. Ivy. Isabel made her way to me, slowly. You okay? Yeah. I shook my head, the energy drain sudden enough to make me want to collapse. Using magic didn't normally drain me like this. What had the ghost done to me? Isabel's hand grabbed my wrist, tugging me towards the door. Jesus, Ivy, you're cold as ice. That's because the ghost of a winter fairy attacked me. I kept my sword in one hand and handed Isabel the now useless censer. Let's get out of here. What did you say about being the target? You think the ghost came after you? It knew my name, I said. And it mentioned Calder. The one ghost who hated me enough to tear open the veil. Both ghosts had known him when he was alive. This whole plan had his fingerprints all over it. Hell, maybe he'd distracted the necromancers on purpose. Shit, said Isabel quietly. Okay, we need to get out first, before the bloody building falls down. This place isn't safe. No kidding, I murmured. We found the two mercs cowering in the corridor outside. What the hell? Shouted the guy. You destroyed our flat! You're lucky to be alive, I retaliated. The ghost's gone. I'd shattered it with my sword, blasted it with death energy. Holy shit on a stick. What I'd done shouldn't be possible with the veil intact. Then again, the ghost shouldn't have been able to physically touch me and throw things at me. God, how is it so powerful? 10 minutes later, the mercs, Isabel and I were outside in the cold air. The building didn't look like it was about to fall apart, any more than it had before the ghost showed up, anyway. Tell your landlord what happened, I said. They should be able to get the necromancers to cover costs. If that fails, come to the mage lords. We'll get Lord Evander to cooperate. Oh, and you can ask Lawson if you need somewhere immediate to stay. I know for a fact he has contacts. Just mention my name and he'll give you anything you ask for. Seriously? Both of them looked at me skeptically. Of course. I used to work with Lawson. Wouldn't want any merc living out on the streets. It's not pretty out there. Not pretty here either. The guy sloped off to call the necromancers. Thanks, the woman added, for whatever you did. Any time, I lied. I hoped this was the last time I'd have to fight a ghost as powerful as that one. Just when I thought I had a handle on my magic, it surprised me again. The last time I'd killed a spirit had been when I'd stabbed a wraith impersonating a Vocus in the grey veil. Right. Call Vance first. I hit the call button. Dial tone. Must be dealing with clients, I said to Isabel. Vance's? She frowned. Where are the necromancers? We've never let a ghost incident slide with no investigation before. Right, I said. I don't give a flying fuck what Lord Evander said. These spirits are getting a power boost from somewhere, and unless they want the whole town to know how stupid they are, they'll have to listen to me this time. You're going to their headquarters? I have to. I turned back to the mercs. Will you be okay? I'd help, but I can't personally arrange to have your possessions replaced. Like I said, speak to Lawson if you need anywhere to stay. It's okay, said the woman. Place was a shithole anyway. Can always move somewhere else. Well, at least she was being reasonable, because God knew the necromancers had a lot to answer for. My phone buzzed in my hand. Finally. Vance?
Ivy, said Vance. Ralph's dead.
Chapter 8. I stared at the phone, then pressed it to my ear again. What? That couldn't be right. I must have heard wrong.
Ralph, Vance said. Someone murdered him. We found him outside the gates.
Shit, I whispered.
I moved away from the mercenary woman, who watched me with a curious expression.
It really was a diversion.
Diversion?
Vance, a ghost showed up. Another half-fairy. He all but told me Calder's behind this. I think they distracted the necromancers on purpose. And me. How did he die?
A pause.
Then Vance said,
He was savaged by some kind of beast. I suspect hellhounds.
I stopped walking. Calder used them last time. I heard the crackle of Vance's power through the phone.
So he did. That said, Lady Granville has appointed herself chief investigator of the murder.
Let me guess. She won't believe someone dead was the murderer.
Not without evidence. Did the ghost mention what happened last night?
The blue light at the manor? No. He laughed at me and tried to kill me. What are you doing now?
Lady Granville has taken the death as a threat to all the mages. She's called a meeting.
Get a tracking spell on it. The part of me used to handling a crisis took over. I didn't know Ralph, nor had I particularly liked him, but I'd dealt with murder cases before. I'll ask Isabel.
We already did,
Vance told me.
The trackers didn't work.
Damn! Last time trackers hadn't functioned had been when Velkas was here, leaving changelings in place of human children. Not at all? Can't you use one on the general area?
We tried. Anger resounded in his tone. Not a trace. It's like the attacker was invisible.
Not to people with the sight. I cursed under my breath. I'd never considered before, but perhaps this wasn't the first time a killer had walked under the mages' noses, unseen by anyone who couldn't see through glamour.
You're right, said Vance. But Lady Granville requests your presence. You won't have long. This is likely to be the only time for a while that all the mages in the area are assembled in one place.
Oh. That meant everyone on the Mage Council, including the people who wanted to take Vance's place, were witnesses. Might one of them be the murderer? Ralph was a god, not a powerful mage. But then, why kill him? Because he saw something he shouldn't have? Great. Now my paranoia had evolved into a many-armed monster. I pushed it down and tried to summon up sympathy for Ralph instead. And fear, because the murder had taken place right outside the manor. It's really shit timing, to say the least. Why did they want me there? Because I'm more than happy to run an interrogation, but I doubt Lady Granville would give me that level of responsibility. Even though, you know, I have experience in that area. Vance paused.
The problem is, 2 witnesses saw you leave the hall after Ralph last night.
Fuck me sideways. On another occasion, Vance would have turned that comment into something suggestive. Instead,